I say that's women rising, and it is the femininity, the feminine power, the divine feminine rising in all of us and in the world. And I think every single human being on this planet has that opportunity, has that job. It's not just for some of us. It's for all of us. It's a space, it's a context, it's a field, it's an energy, it's a privilege, it's an opportunity.
And so what's in the way that you see? What's the kind of, even the most critical thing for us to be able to expand or grow beyond, to step into fulfilling that prophecy?
Well, when we are in a larger context, like the context I just spoke about, we rise to the content, which is us, rises to meet it. When we get petty, when we get small, when we start to doubt ourselves, which women still do, and when we are not in touch with the privilege and opportunity of participating in something larger than our own life starring us, when you have a larger context and when you have a larger frame for your life, then all the petty distractions and the doubts and the am I good enough, or am I tall enough, or am I thin enough, or all those kind of silly conversations start to show up as irrelevant, start to show up as petty and small, rather than who you really are. So one of the things that I think is important for women is to realize how much their life matters, how every decision and choice they make impacts the future of life for the next 1,000 years. For me, standing in a bigger sense of who I am lets me drop my pettiness, keeps me from dwelling in that gap you're talking about, and to actually realize that I have not only a responsibility, but a calling, because I'm born at this time in history. And that's not an accident, I believe. That anyone alive today, the people listening to this call, the women and men listening to this call, but primarily the women, you're alive at a time when you're being called beyond the small understanding of your own life. But you are in a time in history when environmental sustainability depends on the role that women can play. Peace on this planet depends on the role that women can play. Ending hunger depends on the role that women can play. Every major issue on this planet now that we're all facing, the kind of key intervention and disruption that moves the dial and moves those issues forward is the participation, the wholehearted participation and leadership of women. And that's everybody. Mm-hmm. And so to dive into the great gap that you're talking about in a way that you rise out of it in service of something larger than your own life, I think is the way through for everybody.
That's so powerful, Lynne. And I've heard you say this, and this is one of my favorite quotes of yours, and that is that we have the opportunity to have the most meaningful lives that any people or women have ever had in history.
Yes, that's true. And
that really speaks to, you know, when we're in too small a context, these things hold us back, and those things are unsolvable at that level. And how we rise is to expand and have a much larger perspective on who we are and why we're here and why our life matters. So thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Christy, what do you see about this? Just the big and extraordinary opportunity both for women in their own personal lives to rise, as well as to contribute and co-create the future. And what's in the way? The most significant things that you see are in the way that we need to break through and break free from to step forth into this potential.
Well, thanks for the question, Claire. And Lynne, I got to say that was that image of that masculine and that the wing of the feminine is so beautiful. It's like what I co-wrote in Taming Your Alpha Bitch. It's really having the masculine that women saw, what is the power? And so we looked at the male way of being in power. And so a lot of women are finding themselves trying to be so masculine and trying to power over or compete or, do drama and do bullying and things like that, that it just doesn't work anymore. And it's painful to our female psyche. And so it is time for more of that deeper connection and a more expansion of oneness, and that more returning truly back to an energy of love. And so for me, it's all about becoming your own energy master. And when we understand that our thoughts, that our beliefs, that our perspective, the words that we say, the actions that we take, everything is coming from a space of the energy. And if we're consistently finding ourselves, beating our head up against a wall, there's an energy there. And when we can understand that whether the outpicturing looks like a lack of money or a lack of support or the lack of relationships, the things that matter to us in our human existence, then we can understand that we're not powerless to change these things, but it's that we have to look at things a different way. And when you look at it from that connection, I like to say that there's the third eye is like a faith portal, and that we always have faith in something, either what we don't want or what we do want. And when we can start opening up to really that the universe has your back, and that there is an abundance of support and love and possibilities and solutions and all the things that we're looking for, and open up that portal to look for the things that we want to experience, that energy is like the opening, that doorway to your divine self, where that energy can flow in. And then you feel more of a strength. And it's not a power over, power through, power under kind of thing. It's just a strength and a stability. And with that then comes that inner wisdom. That inner wisdom is beyond rationale. It's beyond conscious, logical, linear type of thinking. There's just a knowingness. And when that happens, it's like the heart center, this transmutation station of all energy. When we open it up, all the, like Lynne was talking about, the pettiness, the doubts, the worry, all that stuff it rises up into a higher level of energy and consciousness. But it's really about understanding that we have to master our own energy. And that starts with our mind. And where are we putting our faith?
Well, and what's in the way of us doing that? Like, what holds us back from being able to, truly step into that?
The conditioning of our past, the things that we've been, we are all planted in a little garden, our conditions and our circumstances, what we learned, everything that we know ourselves to be. Those are the things that we identify ourselves with. And when you really think about it from a quantum physics perspective, we're who we know ourselves to be, the age that we're at, all the programming, all the things that we've said about ourselves, all the things other people have said about us, all the perceived mistakes, all the growth that we've had is only 4% of who we really are. That 96% is energy, it's source, it's divine self. And so when we can rise above those limitations and the I am stupid, I am lazy, I'm not enough, I don't have enough, I need something else to make me better, so I will start looking outside of myself, it's those things that need to be shifted. And so it is starting with, what do you say? The words that you say, watching your words about even yourself, what you say to yourself about yourself, if you start shifting that, and telling yourself how fabulous you are and that you're infinitely loved, and really the truth of what exists, like Lynne was saying, it's like you're enough because you're here, and there's no mistake why you're here. The parents might have said, oh, you were an oops, or maybe you didn't feel you were loved, or there was conditionings around your childhood, or maybe you had, parents that weren't there, or you didn't receive the love that you wanted. But know this, you are deeply and infinitely loved by the one that brought you to the party, and now's the time to dance.
Mm-hmm. Powerful. So there's all this power that's right here, all the things that we feel and sense that are in potential. And what holds us back is that we're energizing and identifying with these stories that about our powerlessness, about our worthlessness, about all of those things. So it's like that we got to break through to be able to step forth and rise in this moment.
Yeah. And nobody else can do it. We have our own stories. So it's us choosing, do we want to keep with the old stories, or we want to tell a new one?
Yeah.
Do we want to keep saying the same stuff to ourselves about how we can't make something happen or do something? Or do we want to tell ourselves why we can and how possible it is? But all of that, our feelings, our thoughts, what we say, or the actions we take, it's not depending on anybody else. It's us. And that's what's exciting.
Yeah. Wow. Powerful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sage, what can you add in here? So what's the big opportunity? I know you work specifically with women who are entrepreneurs, who are stepping forth to create their own businesses. What's the big opportunity that you see for women? And what do you see is really holding women back from really stepping forth fully into all of the extraordinary possibilities that are here for us?
I love this question. Thank you for this question. There's never been a better time to be a woman leader. Really, truly. There's never been a better time. Women are starting businesses over the last 15 years, 1.5 times faster than men. You know, Harvard recently did a study that women go further when they go together. They studied groups of all men, groups of all women, and mixed groups. And it was the groups of all women that went the furthest. Women have such an opportunity in front of us, and yet there's still these problems that we're solving, right? We're still making 79 cents on the dollar. And even though we're starting more than 1,200 new businesses a day, Forbes magazine says we're failing faster. Our businesses are failing faster than men's. And so the opportunity is for us to start doing it our way. I've been studying the way women do business for 2 decades. And what I found is that when women try to do business the old way, in a way that's not native to them, we don't succeed as much as when we actually start to bring our new ideas and our new ways of being to the table, which is to do business in a way that's in alignment with women's values, right? To bring leadership to the world in a way that's in alignment with who we truly are, right? To bring leadership in a way that's more about collaboration rather than competition. It's more about empowerment rather than power over. You know, it's more about resource sharing rather than resource extraction. And just like you were saying, Claire, when we do that, we have this opportunity to solve the world's most pressing problems. Now, one of the things that's been true on my personal journey is I've always asked myself the question, like, is bigger always better? And I feel like the feminine in all of us, the feminine in women and the feminine in men, innately has an answer to that question. What is sustainable for our planet, right? I actually almost faced burnout a few years ago. I was really burning out. My company had grown so fast. I went from being a school teacher making $28,000 a year to running a multi-million-dollar company in like 18 months. And thank God, thank the goddess for my friend Lynne Twist, who invited me to come to Ecuador with her. And we had raised a bunch of money for a group of women in the rainforest, helping them protect their jungle home from oil companies, right? So for 2 weeks, I go unplugged, 500 miles past where all the roads end into the middle of the jungle. And I'm asking this question, is bigger always better? And it was the answer that came from the women in the rainforest that really changed my life. They actually blessed me while I was down there with a story that was an opportunity to bring back to the women that I work with. And the story is that in the indigenous cultures, there's masculine roles and feminine roles, right? The feminine role is to create and to make babies. And in the Achuar culture, it's to make chicha, which is their main carbohydrate drink. And the masculine role is to hunt and to be a warrior and to bring home fish for protein and cut down trees for shelter. And what they wanted us to know, what the women in the indigenous culture wanted us to know, is that women have one more role. And that is, it's the women's job to stand up and say enough. When the men have cut down enough trees, it's the women's job to eyeball, that'll build the shelters that we need, don't cut down any more trees. When the men have brought home fish for protein, it's the women's job to say that will feed the village, don't kill any more fish. And when the Achuar people see pictures of the West, there's only one question that they have, and that is, why haven't the women stood up and said, enough? I remember hearing that story and I had tears in my eyes, and I realized it wasn't just about me and what I was doing and the burnout. It was about the feminine's built to create, but it's also our job to know what's sustainable. We have an innate wisdom around what is truly right for this planet. How do we create and bring solutions in a way that honors all beings? And I went back from that trip and I went to town on my business. I brought more joy and more purposefulness than ever before. And when I got tired at the end of the day, I found ways to shut it off so that I could just go be a woman in the world and recharge my batteries. And I thank the women leaders that have touched me in my journey so much. We aren't doing this alone. We can't do this alone, right? It's this opportunity for collaboration and sustainability. I really believe that's at our fingertips.
Powerful. I love that. And so, so much. I love this. I'm just feeling it and integrating like that. Enough. Why haven't the women said it's enough? Well, and I think what it speaks to, just in hearing what everyone shared, is just the tremendous opportunity that we have for global influence and shaping the future of humanity. You know, I think so many of the conversations in the world about women and power are missing a really important piece. And that is, like, the story is about kind of what is and how it's been, and who else is coming to create the future and renegotiate all of those agreements and renegotiate our place in culture and society other than us. And so, you know, the thing that I've really found in my own work in terms of, you know, we all feel, I've worked with so many women from all corners of the globe, and every single woman I meet is feeling a much bigger potential for her life, but she can't necessarily see how to get there. And what I've seen is in our way is that we can't step into the possibility of who we are inside the same system of power and way of creating that's got us here. You know, the impulse that women are feeling now, it's an impulse to self-actualize and to participate in social transformation. It's not just to achieve success in traditional sense. I've done this exercise of helping women connect with their deeper desires, and probably like 40,000 women later, there's not one who connects to her deeper desires who wants more stuff or more status, as nice as those things are to have. We all at our deepest level are feeling a call to not just be successful, but to become what is in potential. We don't just want to be rich or successful. We want to be like the caterpillar. We want to become the butterfly. We want to embody our higher potentials. And that we need a different kind of power that is relational, that is connected, that enables us to grow, to evolve, to express. And I think that's what we're really speaking to in terms of the breakthrough, stepping into a larger context. That is absolutely huge. Letting go of these shame-based stories, stepping out of lack, stepping out of isolation. These are all the findings in my own research. So how do we rise? This is what's here, and this is what's true. And I'd love to just open it up to, you know, what's the breakthrough? What have you seen in your own life? And maybe just, you know, the biggest wisdom that you can share for women to be able to let go of these things that are holding us back and rise in our own lives, and to step forward into the destiny that's calling us, which is to become the creators of the future of our world. Whoever feels moved to start.
Well, I'll go. I feel that it's really about detaching from the stuff. You know, it's like the having the nice car and having the house and all that kind of stuff. It's the hierarchy of needs, right? Do I have food in my belly? Do I have a place to rest my head at night? Of course. But what you're talking about is an essence, because we so assign, if I just have the man, if I have this, if I have a more successful business, if I make more money, then I'm going to feel this way. And it's like the essence and the energy that pulsates through you, that's breathing you, already has the connection to all that you want and all that can sustain you and all that will fulfill you. And so if you're wanting to feel more connected to pure potentiality and to purpose, connect first to that, because then that starts to pulsate and starts to create and gives you ideas and tells you what actions to take and moves you in a direction where you're experiencing and living from that essence that you really truly are wanting, that is not in the cars and the money and all these things. We're spiritual beings having a human experience, and material things are awesome. I'm a girl that loves a pretty pair of shoes, but I'm not attached to my own sense of, esteem based on the shoes I wear. Right. And it's more about what can I contribute? And when when I'm in a place of feeling like I'm in that place of alignment and I'm in service, things come back tenfold anyway. But it's first starting with the essence of what is it that you're wanting, and finding that passion, that purpose, really connecting with that alignment, with that alignment of who you really are and why you're really here. And that first starts with knowing that you're infinitely loved and feeling that love for yourself.
Thank you.
Welcome.
I would love to add that the two things I see takes a lot of women leaders out of the game are overwhelm and isolation. So in my experience, we have to become masterful at not getting caught in those two things that can take us out so that we can bring these amazing gifts to the planet that Christy's talking about. So in order to really get to the front side of overwhelm or isolation or the spinning out, there's so many things we could be doing. We're very hard on ourselves, right? We cannot be sheroes. We cannot be super women every single day, right? Now is not the time of I, it's the time of we. So I believe the opportunity that's in front of us is for us to truly come together like we're doing here. Thank you so much for bringing us together, Claire. There's so much that we can do when we link arms and we make commitments to each other that I have your back, I have your sides, I have your front. Whether you fall on your face, like in our women's entrepreneurial community, we have this saying that says, whether you fall on your face or whether you end up on Oprah, I love you, I'll be with you, because we have fear at both ends of the spectrum. And just like Christy's saying, to really get plugged in to this energy of service. There's no better feeling on the planet to be here for our fellow humans. Because when we think we're doing it alone, when we think it's just about us and our basic needs, we have this upper ceiling that we run into over and over and over again. One of the things I keep looking at with my clients is the difference between being independent, because so many of us are trying so hard to be so independent. If we're not being independent, then we'll fall into this codependency where it's like, somebody rescue me, somebody, discover me so I don't have to do this alone. I don't want to have to get my gifts out into the world all by myself, right? But there's this middle ground of interdependence. And that's what I believe we have the opportunity to become experts at in this incarnation of women and men on the planet who are fully engaging our more collaborative, more purposeful ways to bring solutions that we can truly be interdependent, that we really truly do ask for the support before we really need it. And that as women, we honor our needs as like an innate well of resources inside of us, that we don't forego taking care of ourselves, that we take care of ourselves first, that we realize our needs and giving ourselves what we need and asking for support and being vulnerable and reaching out. I've called Claire in tears a couple of times. I've reached out to Lynne, I've reached out to Christy. None of us are doing this alone. We are stronger and we're better together, and we can go so much further when we surrender to that.
Thank you, Sage. My power statement is, I am not Wonder Woman. I am a mere mortal who needs rest, sleep, support, who can't solve problems by myself.
I get to be Wonder Woman when I surround myself with other Wonder Women.
But it's true, right? Because there's a pressure. There's some idea, and I think I love what you're saying, because I think, so many people see women who are leaders, who are successful, who are running really successful businesses or having a huge influence or impact in the world. And like, that is totally what's happening behind the scenes, so I love that. Thank you. Lynne.
First of all, I love hearing you talk, Sage, about the rainforest and reminding all of us about the teachings from Indigenous people, particularly Indigenous women.
You've been such a teacher to me, Lynne.
Oh, thank you. Well, just to build on what you both, Christy and Sage and Claire, have said, one of the great teachings of Pachamama Alliance, which is another organization that I'm involved with and co-founded, is that Indigenous people do not individuate the way we do. They don't even have a word for I or me in their languages. No Indigenous languages have a word for I or me, only we and us. And that's culture lives in language. And so this idea of individuating we individuate almost at the expense of everybody else. And if we lift up the community that is sisterhood, I'm going to say sisterhood, because when women actually do support each other, like really, without gossip, without backbiting, without betrayal, without unhealthy competition, we are unstoppable. And when we can turn this is something that I love to practice myself. When I find myself in a complaint or something that would border on gossip about something or someone, if I turn that into a commitment, if I move it from complaint to commitment, then I get my power back. That's really moving from victim to source. I work on global warming, and one of the beautiful things about global warming, and I know it's a horrible thing on this planet, and we're terrified about it, and we don't know what to do. But if you think about it as it's not happening to us, it's happening for us. It's happening for us. It's the feedback from the mother. It's the biggest, most clear, most uncompromised feedback from the mother that we've ever had. And if we can receive that feedback as it's happening for us, it is the catalyzing power of the transformation, I say, of women. Because it's the mother speaking to us. It's the great mother. Mm-hmm. And one of the cutting edge conversations now on the planet with global warming, with reversing global warming, which is possible, with stopping these fires, horrible fires in the Amazon, which obviously we all know about, with finding our center in ourselves, is this phrase called regeneration. Regeneration, restoration, renew, resource, regenerate, recreate, revisit, respect, which means respectate, re-see. We're in a time of regeneration and restoration, and it speaks to the broad issues of our time, but it also speaks to what Sage and Christy were talking about, and we were talking about, Claire, regenerating ourselves all the time. Mm-hmm. Who's responsible for that? We are. I am. I'm responsible for regenerating my own energy, regenerating my own commitment, resourcing my own power, reclaiming who I am. And when I can't find that, I'm going to call Sage. I'm going to call you, Claire. I'm going to call Christy now, particularly after this, and draw on the sisterhood, the beauty of the sisterhood, the upliftment of the sisterhood, the water, the nourishment, the food of the sisterhood, and manage my own self as best I can. But when I can't, I know where to go, because the sisterhood will always lift me up. And so I think building that kind of collaboration, that kind of energetic field that is sourced by the Divine Mother and by Mother Nature. It is a feminine energy. It is a restorative energy. It is a nourishment, and it's in all of us. It's available every moment of every day.
Powerful. So just to begin completing our time together today, we just have a few minutes left, just bringing all of these threads together. So the big opportunity and the possibility we feel in our clearest moments, not just for our life, but the role that we're being called to play to create the future, all of that is real. All of that's real. That is absolutely real. Your life matters, your calling matters, your destiny matters, and not just for your own sense of fulfillment, but really, we can't create the future without your voice, without your vision, without you fully actualized and expressed. So to do that, we need to step out of identifying with a smaller story of who we are. We need to step forth as creators. We need to create a sisterhood. And I really love this idea. I've been working with about feminine power, and a new kind of power is to think of power as a verb as opposed to a noun. That a feminine kind of power is something that is in motion. It's the energy of creativity. We are powering through us. We are powering each other. We are powering as we're creating and shaping the future. And that what we are here and being called forth to is to grow and expand. It's not just to, for external circumstances are going to line up that are going to have us be in the life and the future of our world. It's something that can only be created through us. We sense potentials of who we are. We step forth and we fall on our face sometimes, and they don't work out, and then we kind of doubt ourselves. But that's actually the process of growth and learning. We have to get back up. We have to keep going. It's a process like the caterpillar becoming the butterfly of growth into the future. And so if we can trust in the value of who we are, trust ourselves, trust each other, and begin to see us as co-creators in the great work, we will step forth and rise in the time that we're in. Thank you so much.
Hi, everyone. I'm Steve Farrell, the Executive Director for Humanities Team. And next, you're going to hear from Jean Houston, who will now be coming into the Women Rising panel. She was introduced, as you know, earlier by the panel host, Claire Zammit. So welcome, Jean Houston, to Global Oneness Day. It's great to have you with us.
Thank you so very much. I love being here. These are the times, and we are the people. We're living in the most critical moment of human history, because what we do or do not do makes a difference as to whether we evolve or perish. So let's evolve together.
All right, the table is set. Let's jump right in, Jean. Beautiful, thank you. So Jean, what do you see as the big opportunity for women in these troubled times, and what do you see as the way for women to fully step into this opportunity?
Well, I think it is certainly important that for a new world to be born, we have to bring a new mind to bear. But in order to do this, we require another order of human abilities, one that necessitates not only a more comprehensive understanding of our place and responsibility in this world and time, but learning to really tap into the depths and dimensions of what we contain. Critical to this is the rich mind style of women. Something that has been gestating in the womb of preparatory time below these many millennia. And it is a tremendous change in how we think, how we do things, and the emphasis here being on process rather than on product, on making things cohere, develop, grow. The relationships between people and things becoming much more important than final outcome. The world within becoming as important as the world without. And clearly we're living in a time in which it seems that our very nature is in transition. And I think the scope of changes is calling forth potentials, patterns that, as far as we know, have never been needed before. And these are women's ways of knowing, with the emphasis on process rather than product, on relationships, on inner space being as important as outer space, the inner ways. These are women's ways. And what I am finding is that it is women's ways of knowing that may hold the key to the continuation of the human race. I've been around the world. I've worked in 109 countries, and everywhere I go now, I find that it is women working together, creating all kinds of groups of interchange, of exploration. This is something that is, as far as we know, that is unique in human history. And so this is where I live now, and this is what I find, that women are challenging the most sexist institutions, from the medical establishments to business institutions, and at long last, their full creativity is being set free. And women are critical to this. Women hold the mother mind, a mind that is not primarily linear, sequential, objective, but is rather circular. empathic, filled with stories. It's narrative. And in such a mind, solutions seem to arise from the depths and unfolding of understanding. As I said, the inward world having as much value as the outward. And because its approach is systemic, interrelated rather than systematic, because it sees things in constellations rather than in discrete and disconnected facts, it is the feminine mind view is supremely concerned with networking, with interrelationships, with the networking of the individual with a larger social organism. And this is most important as we try to create a planetary society with a deepening of individual cultures. And whatever one wakes up to, it seems to me that a new species, a kind of what I refer to as speciation, is being cooked in the alembic of fusions between people. I mean, the membranes between cultures, between worlds, between old and new ways of being, is something that's happening. A strange multicultural mitosis, you know, and a stranger spawn. And it is not merely cultural fusion, it's a joining together of geographies of mind and body that had never been touched before. I mean, weaving synapses and what should we say, sensibilities to create people who are fused into a kind of new world mind with its unlimited treasures, its empowering capacities. This is what's happening. And this quickening change, this cultural mitosis, this global mind field is happening. I mean, until now, we've been addicted to our separations, believing that the divisions that we feel between races, countries, religions, even between ourselves and nature cannot be bridged. And yet in this time of looming ecological catastrophe, the underlying commonality of our planetary future is inescapable. This worldwide linking of everything. Now you'll say, but Jean, this isn't happening, but indeed it is. You know, as a student of history, I find that you always have a time of regression before you have the emergence of a new order of being, and that's where I believe we are. I think we are moving, in spite of present regression, we're moving into a planetary civilization with high individuation of cultures. And what I find happening around the world is women's conferences, often emotional, spiritual, as well as dealing with social issues. All these sisterhood conferences, Million Women's Circles, the gathering of women. This is the great happening which few traditional organizations are doing. And so I feel very positive about these things. It's a new kind of reality that is coming into time, as important as when we step, depending on the hunt, you know, and settle down to agriculture and civilization. And I think that as women exercise their relationship and building skills with this new technology, it is having a tremendous effect in worldwide communications. I see, for example, what happens in Facebook. I mean, in Twitters, people, women especially, interweaving, exploring. I think with women, there's the discovery of new styles of interpersonal connection, new ways of being in community, given a global society. And I think the movement seems to be away from the egocentric and the ethnocentric to the world-centric, a fundamental change in the nature of civilization, compelling a passage beyond the mindset and institutions of millennia. I've attended many of these meetings around the world, and I am astonished that of the moral and ethical growth toward empathy between individuals and nations that honors the golden rule of human interchange. It is a renaissance of spirit, and it's filled with examples of women leaders rising to network, innovate, challenge, scold, make things happen. And it is even doing this in even some of the most recalcitrant and patriarchal of institutions. Yes, women get trashed. Yes, they become the screens for the most outrageous projections, but somehow, for the most part, they carry on, taking courage from the knowledge that they are part of the biggest change of all, from which there is no turning back. They are social artists. The story is changing.
So, boy, beautiful, Jean. I'm sure that there are a lot of women and men that are nodding their head in agreement here.
Yeah.
So, in about 3 minutes, what are the obstacles? What are the challenges? What are the things that are preventing women from just stepping fully into what you just described?
Well, I think that as the obstacle arises, women get, if anything, more full of a kind of transcendent sense of the rightness of their moving forward. I mean, years ago, Margaret Mead took me to a place where it was a corporation where they had a new woman vice president. And I watched her work, and I watched her talk deeply to people, not just about the quarterly report that they had to get out, but about what was happening in their mind, their inner culture, what was bothering them, what was pulling them forward. And Margaret said, "Jane, watch, look how women are braiding their work with not only what had to be done in this particular corporation, but more importantly, what was happening, what was emerging in their life, in their sensibility, in their feelings, and with a kind of lure of becoming for both their self and as well as society." And in fact, this is what was happening. Now, some of it may look unseen, but it is an enormous growth and happening worldwide. I mean, look at my friend Marianne, who I've known for 35 years, running for president, but running for president from a perspective of really the deepening of the self, of new orders of loving and caring, and at the same time, brilliant ideas, like Elizabeth Warren, brilliant ideas of how to bring forth a new society. And yes, it is emergence through emergency, but it is much, much more. I mean, I am astonished. I am exhilarated. I'm experiencing the stage of the reinvention of who we are, how we are. It is a brand new story coming into time. And it will brook no whiny naysaying. It will not allow for old forms and formulas. It is the very cusp of radical creativity. And that's why I am positive. I feel
and as you mentioned, there are women like yourself, Jean, and Marianne Williamson, Elizabeth Warren, others that are out doing it. So it's clearly our time, and women rising, hooray, a huge role to play. Jean, thank you so much for being part of a Global Oneness Day with us in the Women Rising program. Thank you. Gratitude.
Gratitude.
Thank you so much for your time today, for your wisdom. And I would love to just close by inviting you to share what you're excited about next and any final words of wisdom and where people can get in touch with you. to find out more about your work?
You can head over to womenrockingbusiness.com to get more resources to help you start your business as a woman leader. And that is at www.womenrockingbusiness.com. You can also check me out on TEDx. I'm Sage Lavine. Thank you so much, Claire. Thank you so much, every single one of you, for being here.
Thank you, Sage.
Thank you so much. And you could reach me at christywhitman.com, or I have a series. It's a free series. It's watchyourwords.com that will help you really eliminate those negative words that we want to, those limiting words, and what to switch instead. And so you can go to watchyourwords.com. And I'm really grateful to be invited here. And I'm really honored to be part of this, this sisterhood. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Christy. Thank you. Lynne?
You can go to soulofmoney.org to get involved with any of our coaching or online courses or in-person courses. And also Pachamama, Pachamama, Pachamama means Mother Earth, PachamamaAlliance.org or Pachamama.org to learn about our work in the rainforest and bringing forth an environmentally sustainable, spiritually fulfilling, socially just human presence on this planet. And then finally, Nobel Women's Initiative. I work with the Nobel Women Peace Prize laureates, and you can go to Nobel Women's Initiative or NWI.org to learn about that. And thank you so much for this conversation, for your commitment, Claire, and everybody, anyone who would be on this call, part of this, is someone I want to thank and bow to, because this is the conversation that wants to happen on this planet. And thank you for being part of it. And thank you for including me.
Thank you so much, Lynne. Well, it's been an absolute honor, and I want to encourage everybody to check out these amazing free resources these women have been working for decades and give away generously. And you can join me at femininepower.com. I have a free feminine power training. There's so much more I would want to share with you about how to awaken this feminine system of power, and there's a free training there, femininepower.com. And I'm just so moved and inspired by the conversation today, and I would love to just invite us to just energetically close by linking arms together, and just linking arms with all the women who are here, just energetically, and feeling the energy of this sisterhood, where we are linking arms, a woman to the left of us, linking arms of women to the right of us, knowing that in our connection to ourselves and our inner resources and our wisdom and our creativity, in our connection to the energy and intelligence of life, all of life organizing around our full becoming and participation and contribution. And in this field of connection as co-creators together, we have the power to rise in our own lives and step forth and create the future together. Rise at this critical moment in our human history to step forth with our voice, our vision, and values and shape the future. And together we say yes and thank you, and so it is, and so it shall be. Thank you so much. Such an honor to be with you, and so great to be with you all here at Global Oneness Day. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you.
I'm Karen Palmer. I'm known as Mindful Media Mom and Miss Kindness on all social media. I'll be hosting this incredible panel, Becoming an Evolutionary Pioneer. The first guest that we have is Joan Borysenko. She is a distinguished pioneer in integrative medicine and is a world-renowned expert in mind-body connection. Her work has been foundational in an international healthcare revolution that recognizes the role of meaning and the spiritual dimensions of life as an integral part of health and healing. Eloquent and inspiring in settings that range from hospitals to hospice, from theaters to conference venues, and from boardrooms to houses of worship, she is a credible bridge between faith and reason. Her brilliance, humor, and authenticity, in combination with the latest research, make her a compelling and inspiring speaker and writer. Welcome, Joan, and thank you so much for being here with us today. I'd love for you to just talk a little bit about the work that you're doing in the world, and one thing that you're so inspired by in this field of being a pioneer, an evolutionary pioneer.
Well, my field, of course, is integrative medicine and spirituality. I was once a cancer cell biologist, and this was now in the 1970s when my own dad developed a cancer and unfortunately died not from the cancer, but from the side effect of treatment that affected his mind. It created a mania, and he jumped out a window. And that was the moment, Karen, when I knew that something really vital was missing in the healthcare system. He had not really been approached as a human being. And at that time, there was no liaison between, for example, any department in the hospital and a psychologist or a social worker or somebody who knew the person's life and could help to evaluate the effect of a drug or a treatment on the quality of life. Somehow or other, the patient was not central to it all. And so as a result of that, I completely changed directions. I left not only a tenure track position, but I was about to be tenured in the same department that my husband worked in at the time. He was an immunologist. I was a cancer cell biologist. And I looked for another pathway. And I'll just say one more thing about this because it relates to what excites me in my field now as an evolutionary pioneer. I had, as a graduate student, worked with a great evolutionary pioneer whose name is Dr. Herbert Benson. He was the first person who introduced meditation to medicine. And I worked as a graduate student, and I phoned him up now that I was a faculty member at Tufts University, and I said, hey, my father just died of cancer. And really died because there was nothing that the medical system could give him to calm his anxiety, to help him choose the best treatment option. I want to do that. And I said, furthermore, there's some work at that time by Carl and Stephanie Simonton looking to see whether our imagination could affect our immune system. And it just turned out, this is when you know the universe is on your side, when there's an amazing flow. He said, amazing that you should call today, because I just found out that I got the first fellowship from the National Institutes of Health to retrain MDs and PhDs in a new field called behavioral medicine. And so I left my almost to be tenured position for a postdoc at a fraction of the salary in a field that didn't exist yet, because I was fascinated by two things. One was the need for better patient care, the need to understand a person's whole life. And I'm glad to say that there's a whole field now of integrative medicine, functional medicine, and patient-centered care. So that's improved tremendously since I can't believe it, 50 years or so, since I defected from medical academia. The second part, of course, is that very shortly after I rejoined Herb Benson, a colleague of ours, Dr. John Kabat-Zinn, who was also fascinated by meditation and yoga and its effect on the physical body, he started his mindfulness-based stress reduction program. And now, of course, mindfulness has really affected the entire planet, and meditation as a whole, and an understanding that mind and body are not two, but one simple integrated field. So I'm really, really excited in the direction that medicine is taking, psychology is taking. We have a long way to go, but boy, we're off to a great start, Karen.
Wow, Joan, you know, that is so inspiring, and it's really exciting to have you on here as part of this panel, because we're really seeing how this integral medicine is really taking over not only just the hospitals, but schools and after school programs and, you know, senior centers, and just an incredible work that you've done and brought to our planet. So thank you so, so much. You were a big inspiration in the helping me help my mother-in-law. So I'm so grateful for you. We've never met before, but I've been studying with you for over 20 years. And I absolutely have been right along with your journey. So this is so exciting. And now I get to teach what I learned from you to the children.
Yay.
and John Kabat-Zinn, his wife, I share the beautiful little booklet that they did in mindfulness for children. I shared it yesterday in my after school program. So I'm super excited to bring in our next guest, who is Steve Farrell, who co-founded and led two high growth technology companies based in the Silicon Valley in the 1990s that were featured in Inc. 500 magazine. His companies included some of the brightest minds in technology. Steve walked away from the Valley because he felt a deeper calling to transform an emerging vision into reality. At its core, this vision was about shifting a paradigm where business attunes to the interconnection among all stakeholders, including stockholders, employees, and the community, as well as the sacred inherent in all of life. Steve now leads the Humanities Team nonprofit organization based in Boulder, Colorado, which he founded with Neil Donald Walsh, the best-selling author of Conversations with God series books. The organization is focused on helping people throughout the world awaken to their deepest self and the interconnectedness of everything in the universe. Thank you so much for being here, Steve Farrell. I'm so excited to hear what you're excited about and what you'd like to share about your journey as being an evolutionary pioneer.
Yeah, well, thank you, Karen. Thank you for the generous introduction. And I want to say also it's a real privilege to be here with you, Karen, with you, Joan, and with you, Steve McIntosh. So what an incredible panel here. So as you mentioned, my background is actually as a technology person. I spent about 17 years as a technology executive, actually starting out as a young person in IBM in the 1980s, and then co-founding these two companies in the 1990s in Silicon Valley. And I was pursuing what is the American dream, what is considered the American dream today. And I had the good fortune to be in the right place at the right time and to live that and to do things that those technology that Silicon Valley gets to do, like fly on the private jets and go to the private ski areas, the private everything. But what's interesting is this past Sunday in the New York Times, the cover of the business section said therapy is coming to Silicon Valley. And I understand that deeply, because as many of us know, the American dream is an illusory dream. We never, there's no there in the American dream where we're pursuing materiality and financial gain. It's always the next mirage that's out there in the desert, and then we get to it and there's nothing there, and then we say, oh no, but it's out there a little further. So where we're always trying to double our revenues, our financial revenues. So I got in touch with this in the 1990s, kind of went through my own awakening process where I understood these ancient truths, these timeless truths, that everything is deeply interconnected, that we're actually all emanations of one thing, which in humanities team we call the divine, but that we could just as well call life or love or cosmos or something else. And I realized, and the 1990s was not that different actually from today's world, where when you look out your window, you're very in touch with the issues of climate change, of environmental existential crisis, of gross income inequality, and so on. And I just realized that I was playing a kid's game, really, as a serial entrepreneur, starting these companies and growing these companies. And I lost my passion for business. Mm-hmm. But a huge new passion surfaced. And that was this passion for planetary awakening, for becoming conscious, for this whole becoming conscious as an inner journey that is really deeply affecting our being states. And I realized this is really where I wanted to go personally and where I also wanted to go professionally. And so, as you mentioned, then I got to know Neale Donald Walsch in the 1990s when these Conversations with God books came out. And he invited me to a planning session in early 2003, a couple of years after I sold all my interests in Silicon Valley, and invited me to help launch Humanities Team in the summer, which I did. And then shortly thereafter, he asked me if I would be willing to take on Humanities Team, which at the time was a name, and we had a pretty neat launch up in Wilsonville, Oregon. But we didn't have a nonprofit or 501c3 status or really anything. And I knew it was mine to take. It was my job to do. It was why I was led, really, to sell these companies in Silicon Valley. So I took it, and here I am 16 years later. And Humanities Team, of course, is about this whole planetary awakening. It's about this very personal process of going within, of becoming conscious, of really living in this place of deep connection, or I could even call it communion with the divine, and also with others, with life, with the earth, etc. And we've created many programs in Humanities Team to support this process of individual awakening and also collective awakening, like this program, Global Oneness Day, that had very humble beginnings, where it started out actually as a declaration, a oneness declaration that our Global Council in 2007, 8, 9 circulated around the world, and we gathered 52,000 signatures with just a very simple little declaration that says that we're one with the divine, we're one with each other, and just bringing in these statements of truth. And then after we collected 52,000 signatures, we went to the United Nations in New York City, May 20th, 2010. And Ambassador Anwar Chowdhury received us. And we asked him to take we created a proposal and with the signatures and things, and to take it inside the UN and to have the United Nations create a Global Oneness Day. And Ambassador Chowdhury said, hey, there's 194 countries represented here, and this is very important. We do need a Global Oneness Day, but the United Nations, it would take forever, if at all, that we could create it. So you create a Global Oneness Day. And in shock and surprise, we we said, okay, and did on United Nations Day, which is October 24th. This year, as you know, we're celebrating for 6 days, October 19 to 24, because it's just too much. It's a real fire hose to try and consume 20 panels in one day. You got to be a real diehard. So it's spread over 6 days. And this is the big collective spiritual activism day, where all these incredible people like Joan here and Steve McIntosh and you, Karen, and all of these others are giving of their time freely to come in and to share about their own conscious journey and the work that they're doing, where in many cases they're leading these lucrative careers, like Joan, like Steve, to do this really important work of planetary awakening so that we can create a flourishing planet.
That's incredible, Steve. You know, it's so inspiring to hear your journey, to hear how you went from not knowing if this was the American dream, that knowing that you were searching for something that was considered the American dream, but that was really just illusionary to all of the people who are listening right now, to all the people who are watching. You know, we're always searching for something that we think is going to make us happier or feel better. And instead we can really tune into our own essence and being the best possible version of ourselves, so that we're not ever comparing our life to somebody else's life or comparing ourselves to anybody else, because we're all so uniquely beautiful as expressions of the divine. And our last guest that we have on the panel is Steve McIntosh. JD is a leader in the integral philosophy movement and the author of the acclaimed books, The Presence of the Infinite, The Spiritual Experience of Beauty, Truth, and Goodness, Evolution's Purpose, an integral interpretation of the scientific story of our origins, and integral consciousness and the future of evolution, how the integral worldview is transforming politics, culture, and spirituality. McIntosh currently works as president and co-founder of the integral political think tank, the Institute for Cultural Evolution. His innovative political thinking has recently been featured on NPR, The Daily Beast, The National Journal, The Hill, and in a wide variety of other media. And if you'd like to read the full bios of these incredible, incredible panelists, I encourage you again to go to globalonenesssummit.org, and you will get all the behind the scenes information. And welcome, Steve McIntosh. Thank you so much for being here. What are you excited about? And what would you like to share with our audience about how this journey has been for you?
Well, thank you, Karen. Thank you for that flattering introduction. And again, it's an honor and a pleasure to be here with you, Joan, and you, Steve. Let me start by saying that the story of our society awakening to a more progressive spiritual view, you know, a wider evolutionary paradigm, that this is a very important story, and that our individual journeys trace that to some extent. But my story, my personal story, is a little different than that, in the sense that I became attracted to progressive spirituality at a very early age. I was born in 1960, and throughout the 60s, as a child, I felt like there was this renaissance going on. You know, that the 60s was happening, but I was too young to participate in it. I remember asking my mother, you know, well, what's a flower child? What's all that? So I felt I'd been sort of left behind, and that kindled in me a lifelong interest in renaissances, right? Periods of historical culture when there's been a florescence or a quickening. And I felt deep within my bones that I'd been called to participate in such a renaissance. And so during the 70s, I was particularly attracted to progressive spirituality, especially the elements of that emerging counterculture that found the intersection of science and spirituality. I remember reading Fritjof Capra's book, The Tao of Physics, and Marilyn Ferguson's book, The Aquarian Conspiracy. These are all classics from the 70s. But I could feel that's where much of the paradigm shifting energy was coming from. And I dedicated myself to that. I read as many books as I could as a teenager and really identified with that culture as much as possible. And I had a series of, like, I guess you would call them mini awakenings, sort of touchstones along the path where I felt validated and encouraged, and I felt like I was growing spiritually. But by 1978, I started to realize that my ambitions for this culture, not necessarily for myself, but for this spiritual awakening, a spiritual renaissance, if you will, that I wanted to participate that. I wanted to be a change agent in that movement. And that's really what led me to seek establishment credentials, right? So I went to business school so that I could learn how to be an entrepreneur, and not so much to make money, but to be organizationally creative in the economy. That led me to realize that I needed some kind of a graduate degree. So I decided to go to law school, not because I wanted to be a lawyer, but because, again, it would help develop me intellectually and further solidify my sort of establishment platform. But all the while, I was building this part of my life with the eye toward the future of being a change agent on behalf of the emergence of progressive spirituality. So fast forward to the 90s, this progressive culture is very interesting. Since I've been involved in it, really, from some early period of it, I've seen variety, different kinds of fluorescences. So in the 70s, it was fluorescing a bit. It kind of went underground a little bit in the 80s. There were still some emergence, but then in the 90s, there was a sort of second fluorescence. And there were real metrics to point to how progressive spirituality was gaining ground. It became the largest category in the publishing industry by far, like dwarfing all other categories in mainstream publishing. There was, a New Age bookstore seemed to be opening, in every town. There were thousands of them. And so there was this real sense that the spiritual renaissance that I had been waiting for my life was really beginning to emerge and appear. So at that point, I realized that building, my credentials and developing my career, that period of my life was over, and it was now time to try to help be a change agent for spiritual renaissance. So in 95, I sort of, instead of walking away from my mainstream orientation, I tried to build on that. I tried to use my connections to business and my understanding of the law to create a business. But the mission of the business was to try to discern the art movement that I intuited. So like every one of these periods of human history that have renaissances, there's been an art movement that have gone with it. And so I wanted to not only discern, but actually help create the art that would be a marker and a draw to help further develop this renaissance. And so the business, the tagline was cultural artifacts of the spiritual renaissance. And I tried to intuit what the tenets of that art movement would be. Part of it was sacred geometry, part of it was Zen aesthetics from feudal Japanese culture, and tried to sort of create a fusion. And that happened. The business took off, and I did pretty well with that. But the art movement that I was searching for never really seemed to fluoresce. And by the late 90s, I was starting to become mildly disillusioned with progressive spirituality. It really wasn't the renaissance that I was hoping for. Although it had gained ground and made positive steps in changing the culture, I knew there was more to come. And in 1999, I sort of discovered and became involved with this integral philosophy movement, which emerges out of progressive spirituality. It stands on the shoulders of all of the important cultural accomplishments of progressive spirituality, but it tries to be more inclusive. Instead of rejecting the mainstream culture, it tries to tease apart, the good from the bad, from traditional religion and spirituality, from mainstream modernist culture, that is scientific rationalism is not all bad. It's just, it can't frame the entire universe by itself. So it was around the turn of the millennium that I really became energized. That I felt as though this calling to be part of a spiritual renaissance that I had felt since I was really an adolescent, that integral philosophy was the fulfillment of that calling. And so since then, I've been building and working on helping to develop this perspective, which is closely tied to progressive spirituality, but a little bit different from it. I've written a series of books, and the books are on the evolution of consciousness, right? How consciousness can evolve and how our culture as a whole can evolve and what it means to be a more loving and inclusive society. And that led into 2013 I realized that the most urgent application of this integrative thinking was in politics. That's where it could solve problems that couldn't be solved at previous levels of thinking. So I co-founded this think tank. We got some prominent and wealthy individuals to join our board and support the think tank. And we've had some good progress. But for the last couple of years, I've been working on this book, Developmental Politics, How America Can Grow into a Better Version of Itself. And that's coming out March 1st, and hopefully we'll continue to make an impact on, fostering evolution, gardening for emergence here in America.
Wow, Steve, that is so wonderful. And you answered the question I was just going to ask, because I was just going to ask the question. I'm going to ask this of Joan and Steve Farrell. Can you tell us a little bit about your pioneering work in the area of elevated consciousness? Now, Steve has shared what he's been doing, and I'm so excited for that, Steve McIntosh, because, our political arena needs this kindness and compassion. Our leaders are really stepping into a place of their greatest possible version of themselves. And I'm noticing that more and more leaders are stepping up, and more people on the general consensus. We're seeing just more and more gathering of people and communities coming together. So Joan, can you tell us a little bit about your pioneering work in the area of elevated consciousness?
Sure. When I think about my work, I think about it as a braid. And the three parts of the braid are biology, psychology, and spirituality, because I also happen to be a licensed clinical psychologist as well as a scientist. And from the time almost of earliest memory, I've had very, very deep spiritual experiences, many experiences of light, experiences of communion with all of life. When my mother died, both my son and I went into the light with her. And what I retained from that is really extraordinary. And that is that the entire universe is actually comprised of loving kindness. And that of course, is sometimes difficult for people, because we look around and the world is in great difficulty in many ways. There's a great deal of unfairness and poverty and suffering, and that's an aspect of it. But there's another aspect of it, and that is behind all these appearances lies a unity of loving kindness. And in all of my work, sometimes I go and I talk to a group that is largely a group of scientists. And somehow I will manage, after I get people all on board with the science, to talk about some of this loving kindness. Of course, in psychology now, there's a growing interest in compassion and loving kindness, really in all sectors, and certainly in spirituality. If you look at some of the latest research and some of the wonderful teachers out there, like Tara Brach, for example, and there are many others, it's compassion and loving kindness that are the leading edge of that. And I've always felt that as we teach, I'm a storyteller. I teach a lot through stories, and people relate to stories because we're all human. We're here on a human journey. And what's more fascinating than story? And I would say that the kind of leading edge of what I do, which has actually been the same kind of thing for my whole career. The science gets updated, the psychology gets updated, but it's all about the loving kindness and the connectedness. underneath that, that never changes. And what I'm finding is, at this point, I do a tremendous number of workshops with titles like spirituality and neuroscience and narrative. I do quite a lot with the writing memoir, helping people really put the pieces of their life together in a way where they see the higher order story. And I would say that my work is now and has always been about helping people really find that essence, whatever you want to call it, that light within. It goes by so many names. And to overcome some of the traumas and limitations that are kind of a lampshade that obscure that light, and thus to become not only happier in and of themselves, but to radiate a kind of goodness and a kind of joy that uplifts the people around them. I think of you, Karen, going into schools. And of course, you know, what we all know so well, it's not so much just what you're taught. It's the emanation of wholeness from the person who's teaching it and the way that they personally connect with you that makes all the difference. And so that's my great fascination. And of course, I'm fascinated with the latest in neuroscience, certainly with all of the updated science and epigenetics and the recognition that there's not us in an environment. We're all one. It's the same as there's no one body and mind. There's no one people and environment. Everything is a unified field. And what's been so fascinating to me in recent years is simply to see the explosion of interest in all of these fields, whether it's expressing like through politics or through medicine or through business. Whatever it is, I see a groundswell of that happening. And I think we're living really in times when we see both the light and the shadow. And that's what we need to see to kind of go beyond the both and find what is the living love that underlies the whole thing.
That's so beautiful, Joan. And thank you so much for sharing that, because it's such an important thing that we're seeing on the planet. We're actually seeing that. Farrell, would you like to go into a little bit about the area of elevated consciousness with the work that you're doing?
You bet. Well, boy, you know, Joan, thank you for setting the table here for this. Really, this whole dialogue and with Steve, but where you're bringing in this aspect of inner light, that everything is an emanation of one, that love is its basis. So that's the work of Humanities Team. This is what elevated consciousness is. Of course, is where it's this inner journey that each of us travel, each in our own way, but down to this place of soul, to this place of heart, where this place of connection with the divine in life. This not really mental or emotional. It's really more of a heart and soul based process. It's an inner journey that where we find this, and it's almost beyond words. But this community, the Global Oneness Day community that's tuning in, this is a conscious community. So we're all familiar with it. We've all got our own words we'll put around that. Now, there are two things then that we're focused on broadly in Humanities Team. The first is awakening to this oneness, this sacredness, this wholeness, this love, this inner light. And then the second part is really the most important. It's the behavior change. It's the aspect then of living into the unity of all of life. Because if it's just some waking up process where we understand and know all of a sudden what is so, that's pretty neat and very important, but it's really a first step. And we've got to keep going out on these stepping stones out into to create real meaning, to create, that we've talked here about existential crisis. I believe it's real. Humanities team believes it's real. The way we address existential crisis is we live into the unity of all of life together. There's this behavior change happens that we become conscious. The integral framework, which Steve's bringing in, is important, where they call it waking up, growing up, cleaning up, showing up, and lifting up. So there are these different steps that we take. These are all things that are within this humanities team focus of awakening oneness and then living into the unity of all of life. The living into the unity of all of life is really all of these other four dimensions in the integral framework that are all important for us to really to live into the unity of all of life, to create the behavior change in our home, in communities, and globally. And the most important thing here during Global Oneness Day is just emphasizing the role that we can play individually. I mean, a lot of us have callings to some other things that are beyond that too, but its basis, what's most important is that we all really deeply live that individually, each in our own way. That's really creates the foundation for this whole collective awakening. We can't get there by just some mental emotional thing and hocus pocus. It's just real every day, every moment, every day, living it fully. Now, in terms of our programs, briefly, I mentioned the conscious, the Oneness Declaration and Global Oneness Day. These are two important ones. We're celebrating Global Oneness Day here now. The Oneness Declaration is on our Humanities Team website, humanitiesteam.org. We created a Conscious Business Declaration with other partners too. Also, you can find it on our Humanities Team website or at consciousbusinessdeclaration.org. And that was created with the Club of Budapest, based out of Europe, the Goy Peace Foundation, based out of Japan, Humanities Team, based in the United States, and the Fowler Center for Business as an Agent of Benefit out of Case Western Reserve University. The four NGOs came together to create this Conscious Business Declaration, and its purpose is to bring the fullness of what we're talking about here now into business. So the culture of the business is actually what we're describing. It's the container that's holding the people in their collaboration, in their decision making. Because where the business really is conscious, where its culture is conscious, the leaders are conscious, then when we're conscious, we don't know how to create GMOs. We don't know how to do certain kinds of animal farming. We don't know how to do certain kinds of fishing. We just don't. I mean, it's just fundamentally not who we are when we're conscious. So when we're conscious, we're nurturing. We're supporting, we're lifting up. It's just who we are and what we do. So it's important, this whole conscious business initiative here with these other partners, and there are many others involved as well. And then the fourth one is transformational education. And so we created a really incredible program with Joan Borysenko here, Thomas Hubel, called Healing the Past, which is about healing trauma, which is really important. And here during Global Oneness Day, we're featuring a couple of other programs. One called Our Final Frontier, A Journey to a Mastery in Living with Neil Donald Walsh. Another one called The Science of Self-Empowerment with Greg Braden, Bruce Lipton, and the HeartMath leaders, Deborah Rosman, Howard Martin. Also a conscious leadership program that I'll share a little bit about later. And transformational education is just to put all the building blocks in place to support all of us during this planetary awakening, during this process of creating a flourishing Earth. We are the only nonprofit that is in the global transformational education space. The others are large, quite a bit larger than us. They're all for-profits. we're a nonprofit, we don't have any shareholders. Or we're just pointing straight at, okay, what really needs attention here to support planetary awakening and planet flourishing? Boom, let's go create that program. So, because as a nonprofit, that's what it's all about. We don't have any other reason for being. So, and I'm blessed to be in Humanities team with a lot of colleagues and partners that are amazing, that are just in this. We're either volunteers like myself or lightly paid. We're just passionate about creating a planetary awakening really in this lifetime, during this generation, creating this and bending this path to create a healthy planet, which we must do, and I believe we are doing now.
That is so wonderful, Steve. Thank you so much for sharing that, because I wanted to go into a question for Steve McIntosh. What are some of the challenges that you face, and what are the opportunities that you see?
Well, I mean, of course, our challenge as humanity is climate change. And that's really the focus of this think tank, the Institute for Cultural Evolution, that I've been involved with. But because we worked on climate change for the first couple of years of the organization's life, we began to realize that where we could make the biggest impact was on the political hyperpolarization that was causing half of the country to become somewhat turned off by climate change because it was so associated with progressive politics. So we've been working on overcoming or ameliorating, at least, the hyper-partisanship or polarization that currently afflicts the electorate. But in terms of opportunities, I think, it's a cliche to talk about the Chinese character for opportunity and crisis as the same character. But I think, the presidency of Donald Trump is certainly a crisis, but a big opportunity unto itself. Because it is making things evolve faster, right? I mean, that's a whole analysis, which I'll spare you at the moment. But let me just say that one of the challenges, however, is that as media has become democratized and everyone can have their voice, on the internet, that's created tremendous opportunities, but it's also created a challenge in the sense that some have called it the postmodern condition of the overproduction of meaning. There's so much content out there that it's sometimes hard for the most meaningful content to break through because the metric is popularity, right? So everybody's shooting for, Twitter followers or YouTube views or likes on Facebook, which aren't bad unto themselves. But if our only metric for measuring the quality of ideas is popularity, then that's a challenge. It's a challenge for philosophers like me who are trying to bring new ideas. But those ideas are, it's hard to sort of sugarcoat those into completely popular memes. Of course, that's always a challenge. We just want to do that. We want to make things as popular as possible. But, as Einstein famously said, everything should be made as simple as possible, but no simpler. So making the ideas no simpler than they should be is part of the challenge. But the opportunity is right now that people are hungry for change. They realize that the pressure of these various crises, the climate crises, our political crises, that these pressures are causing people to look for answers in unfamiliar places. And hopefully those unfamiliar places will include the wisdom of progressive spirituality and integral philosophy. And so at least that's one way to talk about challenge and opportunity.
That's awesome. Joan, how about for you? What are some of the challenges that you're facing and the opportunities that you see?
Well, looking now at the sector of health that I've been so involved with over the many years, the biggest kinds of things we're facing right now is, number one, a crisis of addiction. And that ties into all of the other crises when there aren't enough jobs, when people don't feel good about themselves, when people look at how am I going to rise in this society, if people feel like I don't have meaning in my life, and I don't have close connections, when people feel disconnected, they're prone to addiction. And then we know how many lives are being lost because of the opiate crisis. And then added to that, we live in a tremendously toxic world. The toxic load, we have plastic in our bloodstream. We have so many chemicals, I can't even begin to name them. And this is exacting a cause in terms of creating inflammation within the body, creating another problem with toxic overload, hormonal problems. And for the first time, the lifespan in the United States is decreasing rather than increasing. And many sources say, oh, that's just due to the, deaths, overdose deaths. But it isn't. It's due to the fact that, we have big food, big pharma. And by the way, I'm not at all anti-pharmaceuticals. So many of them have resulted in much better quality of life and ability to live. But we take too many drugs, and we eat too much processed food, and the environment is incredibly toxic. And I look at that and think, wow, this is an enormous challenge, and it's a challenge to our whole society. And of course, it's a challenge for people like me who educate about health, because you want people to feel empowered and not disempowered, and think, there's something I can do, and that's very important. And that's the part that I think we can all participate in, is empowering our own selves. That's the most local form of action, to eat a little better, to be a little kinder, which is always my favorite piece of advice, which I first heard from Aldous Huxley when Huston Smith, who, of course, was such a great historian of religions. When he was a graduate student, he was squiring Aldous Huxley along and for a talk at MIT. And he said to Aldous Huxley, after all your spiritual studies for a lifetime, what's the most important thing you can suggest for us personally as a spiritual practice? And Aldous Huxley just said, be a little kinder. And so I always think we need to be kinder to our environment. We need to be kinder to our bodies. And all of this it comes down to, how can we connect with a larger whole in the most loving and respectful way? So that's the challenge for sure. And I know that some of this is very, very difficult for people who tend to associate eating fresh food with, quote, those hippies out there. And it's as an educator, really a challenge, just how to reach out and use language that make people feel good about themselves, to cook like your grandmother used to cook before there were processed foods, whatever it was, that is not a divisive message or an extreme message. So that's what I do daily.
Those are wonderful, wonderful tips, and what a great way to really focus on the opportunities. And Steve Farrell, how about you? What do you see as some of the challenges that you've faced and the opportunities that you see for us?
Well, briefly, the challenges would be it's so ironic that Sir Isaac Newton lived from the late 1700s to the early 1800s, and Newton was the one that had this whole separated the material, physical, what we can see, visible reality from the non-visible reality, and then Darwin came along here 100 years later in the early 1800s. He came into this world, and of course he's primarily known for this whole survival of the fittest thing. So these guys were historical figures back, that lived their lives hundreds of years ago, and yet their influence extends in a mighty way into today's time, because when we look at the mainstream and how we live our lives, this notion that that everything is separate, that we're separate, individuals are separate, the earth is separate, that the divine is up in the clouds somewhere and the devil is down in the, down below us somewhere. And this notion of survival of the fittest, I'm going to get mine, which is kind of the basis for the American dream. All of this stuff is alive and well, which is a challenge. And even though things like our deep interconnection and our oneness are ancient truths, timeless truths, the mystical tradition, spirituality, sacred texts going back to before Christ times all reference these. And then you've got these modern scientists, right? Erwin Schrödinger, Nobel Prize winner for physics, 1933. Quantum physics thus reveals a basic oneness of the universe. And then you've got today, in today's world, Nassim Harriman and Greg Braden and Bruce Lipton and Lynn McTaggart, all of these, Dean Radin, many of these participating in this year's Global Oneness Day, who have made it their life work as physicists, biologists, geologists, etc., to say, this separation thing is not real. Quantum physics is really mostly the basis that where everything at a subatomic level, everything is deeply interconnected. So our cell phones and all of the wireless communications and things rely on this modern quantum physics. But in today's world, in the mainstream, as we talk about our deep connection, oneness, and interior states, the importance of interior states, not just the external world, but interior states where we're doing this inner journey, where we're coming into these being states. These things are still marginalized, and certainly in business, as we bring in conscious business, these concepts are marginalized all over the place. And even in the mainstream, marginalized, in many cases, are left out of the conversation, minimally marginalized often. So those would be some of the challenges. Now, the opportunity is the other side of that, which is that, what is true is true. I think I've got Abraham Lincoln, determine that the thing can and shall be done, and then we shall find the way. Or Mahatma Gandhi, the truth can never be wrong, even if no one hears it. So the truth will always prevail. And the truth is prevailing. We are becoming conscious individually and collectively. I believe we will manifest this planetary awakening and this flourishing Earth. That's the opportunity. And so if we can be, all of us, you viewers, because Global Oneness Day is not about us here, talking. It's about you, all of us really seeing ourselves as that we're going to be the change. We're going to live it. We're going to inspire others. We're going to get this done. We're going to follow our soul's calling, and we're going to invite others to follow our soul's calling. And that's how the job gets done. That's the opportunity. And I can't imagine giving our lives to anything bigger than or more important than that.
That's awesome. And something that I'd like to ask each of you is, what would you say to others who have lucrative careers but feel called to join in the planetary awakening and healing that is unfolding on the planet now? I think I'll send that to Joan first.
Well, that's always a great question because, twice I had a career change. The first was leaving a tenure track, almost tenured position at Tufts Medical School on the faculty to be a postdoc again, and then becoming an instructor in medicine at Harvard, starting a mind-body clinic, running an AIDS clinic and a cancer clinic, and doing work that I felt was so important. And then coming to a point with that where I felt I can only talk so much about spirituality and meaning in this particular context, and I want to devote my life more to that. And so once again, I left a very good position. And it's difficult. It really is, because I had kids to put through college and was getting a divorce and all kinds of things at around that time. And I thought, okay, we're just going to live as simply as we can because I feel a calling. And if you look at what is a calling? What is a true vocation? The Latin for calling, same word as vocal. What's calling you? A calling is something that you cannot say no to. And so that longing, that calling is what calls you out of yourself. And then you've got to figure out, okay, what can I do? What help can I bring in that will allow me to make this shift? And what little step can I take? Because not all of us can leave a job and simply go off and do the next thing. It's often in steps. And for example, a step for me was that in 1987, I wrote one of the first books about mind-body medicine called Minding the Body, Mending the Mind. And that first step opened up a lot of other doors, to go and give lectures here and there at first it was mostly to physicians, then to the general public. But what are the concrete steps that you can take? And I always like to challenge people, if you want to be of more help, what is a step that you could do in 15 minutes or less? Call somebody, network about something, make some exploration, whatever it is, and then write it down, not for some day, but write it down like, okay, I'm going to do it at Friday at 9 in the morning. I'm going to make that phone call or write that email, whatever it may be. And so then you see, as you take a step and you take another step, if the vector of love is moving in that direction, doors open, and the universe will support you. And the last thing I want to say about this is that there's a major difference from doing good works from your ego or doing it from your own essence, which is in connection with the divine guidance. And it's not always easy to tell what's the ego, what's divine guidance. And that's why so often little steps are really important, because you'll see if a flow is created. So for those of you who are out there thinking, how can I help? Some of you are ready to go. You've got the idea, but for the rest of you, one tiny step, put it on your calendar.
God, that's a great tip. I love that. Steve Farrell, what would you give for somebody who is watching right now that is wanting to get more involved in the planetary awakening and healing of the planet?
Well, follow your soul's calling. Yeah, for sure. And the interesting thing is as I've really sat with this, of course, in the conscious community, we talk so much about planetary awakening and living into the unity of all of life and creating, a functional earth and so on, health and well-being. But what's interesting is, as we talk about following our soul's calling, where I just consider my own journey, I was first and foremost saving myself. Honestly, I have saved myself, which sounds a little bit dramatic and almost sounds like I'm bringing in religious terms and things, but in that mental, emotional world, the hamster wheel world, that was exciting in the way that it was exciting, and where priority was the way it worked for as to what I was paying attention to, spending time on, and as I just think I would have been in great trouble in my own health. My relationship with my wife. I have 2 teenagers now, 14 and 17. The relationship that I would have had with my family and my kids. At the end of my life, how I think I would have thought of myself had I continued down that path. So, whereas I've instead, I parachuted out of that world to come into this conscious journey, following my soul's calling, and I saved myself. I've created health and well-being for myself, for my family, and work with these lovely coworkers who are just really deeply in this with me. And I think I'll probably live a long time, and I'm probably going to have incredible health and well-being and prosperity in all of its forms. So I would say follow your soul's calling. It's the most important thing you can do for yourself.
Absolutely. And Steve McIntosh, what would you say to people who are listening right now?
Well, I would say that as you evolve, as your own consciousness evolves, as you feel the call of evolution and you participate in spiritual growth and the growth of your values and your worldview, my advice is to remember evolution's own technique, where the most stable and sustainable kinds of transcendence are those that include the best of what's come before, right? So molecules transcend and include atoms, right? Cells transcend and include molecules. They're building on the best of what came before. And so when it comes to the evolution of consciousness, I would say that one of the ways that we can be most effective as change agents and evolutionary pioneers, right? Everyone can be an evolutionary pioneer in their own way by making sure to include the best of what came before as they move to transition. So often when people awaken to progressive consciousness, they have a spirit of rejection of the larger society. They sort of see it as evil. And I would say that there are many important things that the previous stages of history have accomplished that we need to continue to stand on the shoulders of, that we need to include in our transcendence. Like the scientific rationality, right? We don't want to leave that entirely behind. That spirit of critical thinking is one of the ways that we can keep on improving, right? So be critical of yourself. Be critical of your own opinions, right? Question your assumptions and hold on to, include that critical spirit that wants things to be better in a hard-headed way. And then I would also say include the previous level, the traditional level, include faith. I mean, even though your faith may evolve, it may not be a kind of traditional religious faith, but there's something very important. It's something foundational to our civilization that really emanates from that traditional level that we can carry forward, that we can include as we transcend. And so this evolutionary motif of transcendence and inclusion is a very important thing to keep in mind on the evolutionary journey, because it ensures that the structure of emergence, if you will, can continue to build on itself, and that when people are ready to transcend our culture, they'll be able to look back and say, this progressive culture had some very important things that even though we're moving beyond it, we want to include those things and bring those forward into evolution as well.
That's so great, Steve. And what kind of exciting projects do you have, and what would be a call to action for our viewers today that people could get to support your work and learn more about what you're doing in the world?
Sure. Well, real quickly, in addition to my book, Developmental Politics, one of the things that I'm doing with the Institute for Cultural Evolution think tank is we're developing an exercise to develop political will. It's an exercise in evolving your consciousness that involves creating your portrait of the good, understanding, clarifying what's really transcendent for you, what your highest aspirations are, and what practices go with channeling the energy of goodness, the political will of transcendence, if you will. And so we hope to gain some good reach and impact with that exercise. And then the other thing is that I'm co-authoring a book that's coming out next June. The title isn't finalized, but that's a book on conscious leadership. I'm writing that with John Mackey of Whole Foods and Carter Phipps, who's my colleague at the think tank. And this conscious leadership book, it was published by Penguin, should get a lot of publicity. And we hope that will continue to draw the business world into a more conscious place. And so my call to action is for people who are listening, continue to learn, continue to grow, continue to transcend and include.
What's the best website for people to learn more about this work that you're doing and to get involved? Yeah, thanks. Well, my author website is stevemcintosh.com. And the think tank's website is culturalevolution.org. It's a 501c3, and that's where you can find a variety of exercises on the evolution of consciousness. I love that. And Steve Farrell, do you have any exciting projects getting ready to happen, and anything that you'd like to share about the Global Oneness viewers to know about all the wonderful projects that you have, Steve Farrell, and how you can share a call to action also?
You bet. Well, conscious leadership, I'll just focus on that one too. It's so important, and we're using conscious leadership in the term here in the where we're talking about leadership in the sense that everybody's a leader. Right? Everybody is a leader. That's why we were born into this time, that we all have a leadership role to play. So there's the context here for this is that not an elite leadership, but that we're all leaders and we all need to step fully into our leadership. So this, of course, is the theme for our 10th anniversary Global Oneness Day, this Global Oneness Day program, conscious leadership for a rapidly changing world. And so right after Global Oneness Day, I'm leading an 8-week program on conscious leadership that addresses this. It starts out by talking about how we become fully conscious, and then how we step into our full power, and then how we lift up our surroundings, including the collective, through our conscious leadership. That whole process. There actually are 3 free online events that you could you'll get an email about them. You can decide to participate if you like. And then in the program that I'll do following the 3 free online events, some leaders that were part of my whole bibliography putting the program together. Michael Beckwith, Neil Donald Walsh, Greg Braden, Bruce Lipton, Lynn McTaggart, Jean Houston, Barbara Marks Hubbard's family. They're all coming in as guest instructors during the program and speak to the particular, they're all thought leaders, but they're especially strong thought leaders in particular dimensions of what conscious leadership is. So if that intrigues you, and if you want to step fully into your leadership, as a conscious leader, on the Humanities Team website with a Y, humanitiesteam.org, and globalonenesssummit.org, you can learn more.
Wonderful. And Joan, how about you? Do you have any exciting projects or a call to action for our viewers today?
Yes, I'd say that the call to action really has to do with small community and having a group of people that you share deep values with, and so that you can inspire each other. One of the things that's happening really now on the spiritual scene is that attendance at churches and temples is down. And people will say, well, I'm not religious, but I'm spiritual. Steve McIntosh made the really important point that faith traditions have always been important throughout the world and throughout this country. It's one way that people get together, they get the support we need as human beings, and they can engage in good works. And what I hear over and over from people is, I need a community, I need a community. And that's my call to action. What kind of community can you put together? Even if it's a group of a couple of friends who meet every other week and maybe look at, one of these wonderful books of Lynn McTaggart or Bruce Lipton or Steve McIntosh or mine or whoever's, and really discuss these things, and then think, what can we do in our community? It's just been the fall equinox. And for many years, one of the little services I did in my community was to have equinox and solstice celebrations, where a circle of 50 or 60 people would gather, and we would meditate together and sing together and pray together and drum together. And then small groups of those people got together. I'm all in favor of online programs. I do many of them. People can go to joanborysenko.com and look at my schedule, and you'll see what's online, and you'll see the face-to-face programs. And I'm committed to doing not only face-to-face programs, but small ones. I have a number of writing programs, for example, like the spiritual art of memoir. And those they're small. They're 30, maybe somewhere between 30 people. I think the biggest one I ever did was 50. And that would be the limit, because it's the community that's built. Very different to be face-to-face rather than online. So let's all remember that. We can connect online, but we need to connect with each other. And that's a big call to action. How can you connect in your community and help other people connect to a meaningful, loving, growing group of like-minded, like-hearted people?
That is so beautiful. And what a beautiful panel this has been. And what a beautiful time that we've had spending together. If people want to learn more about me, you can go to globalkindnesstv.org. I'm a mom who made a wish for global kindness to go viral, and it started a kindness revolution. And it's been an incredible journey. I love to amplify the work that everyone's doing out in the world. I'm also a spokesperson for We the World, so you can email me directly at karenpalmer@wetheworld.org. And you can also check out our gardens of globalunity.org. This is just what Joan's been talking about. I had this vision of creating a place where we could have a virtual garden where people could share what they're doing in their own community to grow more kindness and unity. We started that in my little small town, and our mayor has dedicated our festival to growing more kindness and unity in our community. And we, in the Solvang, California, are going to be the very first World Kindness and Compassionate City. And we're going to be leading the way, just like the pioneers here will be leading the way, to invite several of the organizations that are involved with the Charter for Compassion.org, with WeTheWorld.org, with the CompassionGames.org. There's so many ways that people can get involved and go from that me society to we society, because we're all in this together. And that's what this beautiful Global Oneness Summit to me is all about. And thank you so much, Steve and Steve and Joan and Garth and Tim for being behind the scenes, and all the beautiful people involved with the humanities team. It's such a blessing to be a part of something so, so wonderful for our planet. And thank you everyone who's watching. Make sure that you like the page on Global Oneness Day, and also check out all the ways that you can get involved on Twitter and Instagram, and use your sacred social media. Take a step forward using social media and technology for a greater good, and notice how this global oneness is expanding, and how the vision of this is our 10-year anniversary, how so many beautiful souls have gotten involved in this. And thank you everyone so much for watching, and make sure you share this broadcast on all of your platforms. And thanks again for being here, and thanks again. Remember, do something kind every day.
Midaki Epi, my very beloved and respected relatives of the human family, we're very, very thankful to welcome you to our webinar, Oneness in the Unity Sciences. And to begin, I would like to ask my dear sister, Diane Longboat, if she would give us an opening prayer before we journey into this very, very exciting area of understanding.
Nyawa, dear relatives, it's my honor to offer some words on behalf of all of us to give thanks to our Creator for such a beautiful day and for such an opportunity that lies before us. My name is Gahandagwas, and I'm Turtle Clan, the Ganyangehaga people, the Mohawk people of 6 nations in the Grand River Territory. And I want to offer these few words on behalf of all of us just to give thanks and to position us as individuals coming from various places who are now seeking the Creator's guidance. Nyawa Sangwe Disam, Ganalunkwa, Skana, Gahandagwa. So grateful to you, Sangwe Disam, for this precious day of life that we have, that we can share that sacred breath of life with one another. This day, Sangwe Disam, we are mindful that we will consume waters, medicines, foods, from the abundance and the love of Mother Earth. We give thanks for our great Mother who sustains all life here, and for the beautiful waters that are coursing through her veins, the waters that are salt waters and fresh waters, the waters that are coming to us this week in the form of rain from the thunderbirds. We give thanks and honor to the birth waters that are restoring new life here upon Mother Earth. We acknowledge and give thanks that the Creator had a magnificent vision and collected the most beautiful dusts and pollens from across the universe and swirled them together to make our Mother the Earth. And so today we honor and give thanks for that mineral life that is underneath our feet. We also give thanks and honor to the oldest form of life upon the earth, which is the plant life. And in our region, the strawberries are the lead of all the medicine plants. And of course, the sacred tobacco is the highest medicine that we use in our communication with our Creator. We give thanks and honor to all of the animal beings and their great council, all of the ones that are 2-legged, 4-legged, the flyers, the swimmers, down to the littlest microbes that are in the soil that bring life to the soil. We honor and give thanks to all of the council of creation, of which the human family is the youngest. And we honor across the face of the earth all of the beautiful faith traditions that we have, the many cultures that are manifested in their beauty and diversity, and the races of people upon the earth that enrich the earth. And so this day, Sangwe Disam, we are mindful that the winds are moving and blowing, that they are cleansing and renewing and refreshing our Mother the Earth. We give thanks to the thunder beings that will join us here to refresh and heal the earth, the land, the air, and the waters. We give thanks and honor, Sangwe Disam, for the 4 sacred beings that the Creator has put in place to watch over humanity. And from time to time, one has been lowered here to bring us great vision and teaching and guidance, and above all, correction when we as human family fall off our path. We honor and give thanks to those 4 sacred beings, for they have formed the great faith traditions of the human family. This day, Sangwe Disam, we are mindful of the stars that teach us so much about this time and the coming generations. And we thank those stars. Thank the ones that are forming that great bridge called the Milky Way. The Grandmother Moon taking care of the great waters upon the earth, the female life for fertility, and the great medicine of protection and healing in the evening time. We honor our grandfather, the sun, whose great light brings life to the world. He who never fails in his journey to walk the earth, to bring life and renew life each day. May we all follow his great conviction to never fail on behalf of the Creator. We acknowledge that those stars called the Milky Way join the natural world to the high heavens of the spirit world. And on the other side of that bridge, we will walk one day as our bodies nourish Mother Earth and our souls return to that place of peace. We find on the other side of that bridge the beautiful fires of our ancestors that are burning there. Their great prayers on our behalf their dreams and visions are being fulfilled because they are connecting with us now, and they are joining us to that great life force on Mother Earth for a renewal and a resurgence in a new era. We have leaders, council fire, and around that great council fire sit the prophets, the visionaries, the great teachers, the healers, the leaders that have been put in place by the Creator as spirit beings to serve the Creator's will upon the earth. We acknowledge them. And this day, some way, Diesel, we give thanks to you that you give us this rare and very special opportunity to join together. We ask this day that you watch over us as every word, thought, behavior, and action is given in your honor. Yawa, miigwech.
Oh, hey. Oh, hey. Well, I thank you so much, Sister Diane, for your always heartfelt prayers. And our sister, Diane Longboat, Kakwas, I'm saying that right, sister?
Wahundakwas.
Would you share, please, the meaning of that name? Because every one of our names has meaning.
So this name is very precious to me. It was the first name that I was given by one of our clan mothers in our community and confirmed by our chiefs, who stood me up in the longhouse along with my youngest daughter and sang for us and sang my name to all of creation. And means she's picking sweetgrass. And I strive for that in my life. I strive for the medicine that sweetgrass provides, which is the medicine of peace, the medicine of balance.
Beautiful. Well, Sister Diane is a member of the Turtle Clan and Mohawk Nation at Six Nations Grand River Territory, Canada. She's a ceremonial leader, a traditional teacher, and a healer. She has served as an elder for the Center for Addiction and Mental Health since January of 2013, and is also senior project manager for Guiding Directions implementation. She's the founder of the Soul of the Mother, a healing lodge on the shores of Grand River at Six Nations Grand River Territory, and has extensive relationships with all our relatives all across Turtle Island and beyond. And I think that what really moves me with Sister Diane, in fact, everybody on this panel, is that she just has what I call just a pure good heart. And she has done a lot of healing, and she's got a great sense of humor, and she laughs at my corny jokes. So, without further ado, we are ready, sister. On your perspectives on oneness, on quantum physics, on whatever you want to talk about, please.
Thank you so much. Thank you for that beautiful introduction, Phil. I really appreciate it. I want to talk today a little bit about the Creator's vision for the creation of Mother Earth. And I want to go back to the Thanksgiving address that I gave and shared with us as the opening prayer. Because I said in that Thanksgiving address that the Creator visited the most beautiful places in the universe, gathered the dust and the bones, and put them together to form our Mother, the Earth. He put a great life force inside our Mother when he did that, and that life force made everything come alive that touched the earth. It was a powerful moment of creation. And of course, all life upon the earth understands that there's duties and responsibilities for giving thanks for that life force and for supporting, doing your best to support life here. One of the things that is coming to me most strongly in the last 6 months is the importance of sound. And you know, our people have always said with the drum, it is the heartbeat of the earth. But there's so much more to how the earth sounds. And so when we're fasting and when we're sundancing and when we're giving offerings, whether it's flesh offerings in the sundance, whether it's fasting on the land, whether it's hanging offerings, and you're standing on the earth in your bare feet, you can feel that heartbeat of the mother. And you know that the earth is alive. Most recently, I heard the heartbeat of the water. And I want to share that with you because back in the late 50s, early 60s, there's a river in the Northwest Territories. And they put a sound machine into the water. And what you could hear very clearly was the heartbeat of the water. It sounds exactly like a human heartbeat. And later on, that river was dammed. And when the river was dammed, the heartbeat became weaker. When we sit at the sacred fire, and I would say that all of our ceremonies involve the sacred fire, there is also that crackling sound that you hear at the fire. But if you sit there long enough and everything is quiet around you, then you can hear also the heartbeat of the fire. Most recently, I was reading an article about the whales and how whales leave the coast of California after they've been feeding, and they come up the coast outside of British Columbia. And when they arrive, they do a special ceremony. They collect themselves in a circle. Their pod collects in a circle, and they take a big gulp of air, and they all go down to a specific depth that they all know how far to go down, and they turn and they come up, and they let out these great big air bubbles that pop on the surface. And when they come up and they breach, and they're celebrating life, but they also emanate a sound. And what scientists have found is that sound is also coming to the earth from outer space, the same sound. And so that sound is heartbeat of the oneness of the universe, the heartbeat that Mother Earth is the womb of the universe, that we are being tested here as to our understanding of natural law, our understanding of spiritual law. And as we are being tested here, I have to say that, sometimes people would say that we are failing, but I really believe that is not true anymore. I believe that we are entering a new era of resurgence for the human family. It's a powerful time to be alive, and it's a powerful time to understand the power that we have as human family to bring change into the world. And so as much as people would cry for the destruction of the earth, and we all have cried for the destruction of the earth, and the climate change that is now a climate crisis, and I would say that we are on the verge of climate destruction if we do not change our ways. But I believe at this moment in time that we've reached a tipping point where there are enough of us in place to be able to give that wave of change great momentum. No matter what the politics are, no matter what the geographical boundaries are, no matter what is in our way that would appear to be a challenge. That oneness of the Creator's vision was manifested in earth, in fire, in water, and air. And that vision of the Creator will never be destroyed as long as there are individuals such as ourselves and others across the networks of the world that will bring that vision to its fullness. We understand that there's a lot of work to do, and we're ready for that work. And I want to tell you most recently about a dream that one of our young Ganyangehaga women had. And it was a powerful dream about 5 years ago now. And in that dream, she was standing in a profound wasteland. There was no real color because everything was dry and the winds were swirling around with great dust clouds. There were no flowers, no green, no birds singing. And the feeling that she had was profound sadness and loss and grieving that life had left the earth. And the spirit being that was standing beside her said to her really clearly, "This is the world to come when hope is lost. Only the grandmothers can restore hope through their unconditional love, their sense of justice, their peaceful ways, and their strong spiritual connections to a greater power." So when I deliver that dream message to you today, it's not about Indigenous grandmothers. It's not about Asian grandmothers. That spiritual message was that grandmothers have a profound role to play today in the healing of Mother Earth. When that young girl passed tobacco to me to talk about her dream, I asked her if she would go home and gather the grandmothers together and gather the young women together and talk about the dream and ask them, where do you want to go with this movement? And so today what I can tell you is that there's a very powerful movement of young women and grandmothers at Akwesasne, New York, Akwesasne, Ontario. It straddles the Canada-US border, the second largest Mohawk community in Canada. And those young women and those grandmothers have created a movement to pray for the waters, to protect the waters, to heal the waters. And I have been witness in many, many ceremonies to the power of prayer. And I want to share with you, relatives, one thing today, that whatever we pray for, the Creator will answer us. We are going to get what we pray for. And so we need to be careful about that. We need to be strategic about that, about how we pray together and the numbers of people who pray and, gathering people to pray. That's what I mean about strategic. But the power now, that oneness of the belief in a new economic order, a new spiritual sense of natural law and spiritual law guiding us as human beings, that's all within our grasp now. And I want to say that I'm just a small little piece of that movement and that message. Nyawa, thank you so much, Phil.
Thank you so much, sister. Really, really, really appreciated your sharing, and how all that you speak about our human family life all comes out of that place of oneness. I was speaking earlier with my Toja, Lyla June, and we were speaking about why it is we have an all sister, niece, all female, however, grandmother, young person panel. And I heard some brothers ask me that, and I said, because, I believe the sacred prophecies that say that we shall, through all we've gone through in the last 500 years, shall become so illumined, we shall enlighten the entire world and all members of the human family for our gift, because we receive many other gifts from other members of the human family. But that enlightenment is not just a spiritual enlightenment. It's a whole new way of thinking. Now, and I'm sure there's many cultures have many different ways, but I can tell you from my father how treasured and honored the spiritual insight and power and visions of women was. He said many times, before people woke up, 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, the wife would wake up and say to her husband, greatest man, that's what we call husband, we need to go to so-and-so's house. That man would not even question one moment. He'd go up and get that team of horses. He'd get things ready, and away they'd go, and they'd arrive just in time to help that person. As well, up to the north, our beloved Inuit healers, they would literally, to come in contact with the feminine dimension of who they were as human beings, or who we are as human beings, they would dress as women, literally putting on artificial breasts to get in contact with that spiritual dimension of who they are. Because if we really think about it, if we're going to come back in contact and really in oneness with Mother Earth, that means that the womankind, they have to reconnect, because we're born of the womb, of the sacred breast of which we're nourished and born of our beloved Mother Earth. So it's really, as I see it, that is, we have to be able to stop as men and stop and listen. I better follow my own guidance and listen to what's being said here by our beloved womankind, which really reflect back to us, as well as we to them, the very feminine dimensions of who we are, as well as human beings. So I'm very excited to introduce dear sister, Dr. Anita Sanchez. And Sister Anita was good friends with my father and mother. She has been for over 40 years weaving indigenous wisdom together with scientific understanding. And so in that process is a member of the American Indian Science and Engineering Society, in which my parents were founding elders, and they took pity on me. And so I'm also a member of the ACES Elders Council, which I'm really honored and privileged to be part of. But as well, it's so wonderful because, Sister Anita has not only done incredible things academically, writing best-selling Success University for Women in Business, The Four Sacred Gifts, Indigenous Wisdom for Modern Times, which was just awarded the International Latino Book Award as the most inspirational nonfiction, best spiritual, best self-help book. She's a member of the directors of Pioneers, Pachamama Alliance, which we're really working closely with in terms of their whole initiative behind, I'm saying right there, but with Amazon Watch and this whole thing is happening with Amazon. And every year, this is what I love, you go to the Sacred Headwaters, which I was there with a team, in fact, with Atosa and others from Pachamama Alliance and so forth, where she visits the Achuar, Sapara, and Quechua people, who are beloved people. So she goes right down there every year to reconnect. So I'm just excited. We got about all together in 90 minutes, so we're just great. So please, you got Sister Diane right there. Get your riot going, and now here we go. Sister Anita, please.
Thank you so much. And I have to say, every time I hear your voice or see you, I feel so much your parents' energy. And so it just gives me great honor. And I'm also not different than your parents, what you're doing. I'm so happy to be with all of you women, you leaders, your healers, your lovers of life. When I began thinking about this panel, just all these women just kept coming forward in my mind. So, but since you brought up the Amazon, why don't I go ahead and start there and just say what's coming through at this moment. And I think it's like Diana was talking about, we've all cried and we will cry again. And of course, there's been many tears shed with the burning of the Amazon. And it's been going on for some time. But what is different is that now more and more people are aware of it. And more not only aware, but you could see the gatherings and the initiatives to bring money to bear on this coming forward. But you also hear the science. Finally, beginning to hear how that isn't someplace down there, in South America and Brazil, or the Amazon goes right up through to the Andes in Ecuador, where the sacred headwaters start, but that this is the lungs of our earth. These are the things that, my grandmother and my great-grandmother and her grandmother and great-mother, these are the things that was taught from very early on about our interconnection. So I allow myself to go ahead and cry, because what I find is that, as the elders taught, is, you don't want to push down these emotions. These all affect us. It affects our spirit, it affects our mind, it affects our physical being. You go through it. But what I find is, as in those teachings, allowing to drop further and further and further in them, is that always underneath all that pain and suffering, because we are hurting ourselves, as that rainforest, our lung, we're hurting ourselves, is this incredible love. And if we could allow ourselves, which women don't try to stop the tears, don't try to stop the happiness, don't try any of it, but rather understand it, embrace it, let it flow, because just like the seasons, it changes. And so to hear people now saying, 20% of our oxygen comes from the Amazon. Oh my gosh, I have to tell you, yes, it's a horror. And what a blessing, the awakening that Diane Longboat was talking about. That awakening is happening, and science is right along there with us now. I felt always, as I listened going to college, and I'd go after classes and I'd sit in the hallways, because at my university, Vine Deloria Jr. was there, and he would say things different than I was getting in the university, and even in getting my PhD. He would say things about, we're the first scientists, remember that. Even though we're discounted, these stories, these prophecies, no, they're not based on measurement and all of that. Well, those prophecies are a way for our people, for us to transmit not only to us, but to all human beings, because we're not protecting the water, the rainforest, the oceans, all of this for just us. We understand we're intimately interconnected. And now biologist E.O. Wilson, one of the most famous, he is showing us the same. All of these things, we didn't need the affirmation as Indigenous people, because we know our prophecies are a way of remembering and a way of looking forward in the natural laws. But what makes me so happy is to hear in the new sciences, even beyond the quantum physics, because quantum physicists, fortunately at this point, are even saying the thing they agree on is we don't know. There's a lot we don't know, and there's a lot we may never know, be able to measure. Oh my gosh, that's what my grandmother was teaching me, and my mother was teaching me, and all of the women I know as I travel around the world being a messenger and in different ceremonies is, we are to embrace what is known and unknown. All of that is part of the hoof of life. This is all needless separation. So even separating spirituality and science, these are two wonderful views of making sense of the world, because what we're trying to do is figure out what is real. And at the same time, when I say that, I think about all the women, the Indigenous women, and some of them I had to hunt for. I mean, back in the 70s, I had to hunt to find women to quote Indigenous women. And fortunately, there was like an Appeal, Colorado, and some other women that I could find who were still out there, who were just moving and connecting and weaving the spirituality and the science and the way of knowing through our stories, through our prophecies, so that we can create living, sustainable, that all the beings are calling forth us to do. So finally, what I find, Brother Phil and sisters, is that I marvel at this, because it used to be, as I'd work in some organizations, some businesses in particular, they were like, oh, you could see that nonverbals don't go that far. And I was there to teach, I'm there still, to teach diversity and inclusion, so I can bring in the Indigenous wisdom, but still was like, oh, it's changed, my sisters and brother. Now, when I am speaking and sharing the wisdom that's come from, that I'm learning today from you, and that I've been learning from decades from different people, and I continue to go forward and learn in the Amazon, they are leaning forward, because they are listening not just with their heads, they're listening with their hearts. We are starting to connect up, not just what is out here, because we're going to be limited if we can't connect up what's inside. We are the universe. Science, I am the universe is me, and I'm in the universe. We are one hoop of life. It's not us and them, or they and us. It's a one hoop. one world. And so to have that begin to awaken in a way that we can hear it, whether I'm with teenagers, which I was just a few weeks ago, and got to hear Shia Batista, who is one of the leaders of the Friday Strike for the Future, that has worked with, listen to Greta, and how this is necessary, our connection to the earth. And so she's organizing across the U.S. for millions of us to come out on September 20th at noon to be with the young people, inviting with such a loving way. Not, oh, we're young, you're old, we don't. No, it's the way that I've always been taught, and that we are coming together. And it's from the north and the south. So whether it's the eagle hoop prophecy of all the indigenous coming from the top of the America all the way down to the, Tierra del Fuego, all the connection, or around the world, what is happening. Where I just was in Kyrgyzstan with a dozen women elders from all over the world, and then a dozen local indigenous Kyrgyz women, and they were showing us in ceremony. Every day we did ceremony, and it was all about unity. And they spoke at science at different times, but more of a, they're coming along now. They got their understanding that this is far more than measurement, that we are actually with our minds impacting and creating things, that earth is us and we are the earth and the water. And so why would one hurt part of oneself and the other? Because it's not only about me, it's we, it's our collective that is being either uplifted or hurt. And so what we now are starting to understand, and in their ceremonies, it was so powerful and beautiful. It was just, I have to breathe in on that. It was just very different than the prayer ties I'm used to here, where they use the wool that they have and prayer, and we did thousands and thousands of prayers and dipped it in ghee, and they created this pyramid, and that was the fire, and we danced and sang, and there was some structure, but there were also, translation, and just things evolved as women do. We didn't have a script for what was happening here, and Brother Phil, you trusted, and we all trusted. We don't know what we are going to say, but we know it is, if we are coming from that place, that center place, the knowing that everything, me and everything, every being is sacred, that what will come through this vessel is what needed to be heard, whether it's from one person or for millions, whatever it is. And so they shared all that. And I say all that only to go back to the Amazon. And I teach a lot. I love applied neurophysiology. I always have been interested in how the brain works. And I knew that to do that, I would have to get a doctorate. In some ways, that's very sad, because that's in part also limits your view. But fortunately, the indigenous grandmothers, they and my mom and all of them just held in there. So that was so embedded in my DNA that I could listen to that and see, not let go of the larger truth, the larger possibility, the larger prophecies and way of knowing that how we impact each other. So in the Amazon, why I take people there every year, it is clearly for me, I am not totally, giving it. I get so filled up when I go there, but I bring all these folks. It's like seeing fire for this time, but they are actually witnessing people who for millennia have not separate dream time and waking time. They have an understanding of the mind, maybe not using the scientific languages as, brain science, but they understand it so much more fully about what we're creating. And when we go down there and they ask, well, what is happening? And then we share what's going on, then they just look very lovingly and also concerned, and you're like, you need to go dream a new dream. So tell us about some of your other things. Tell us about your prophecy. And of course, the prophecies are learned. Yes, some of them show the possibility of what can happen if we don't abide by the natural laws. But most of them is about a loving universe, about bringing together all the directions, all the minerals, all the beings. And I'm talking not just the earth, I'm talking about the whole cosmos, as Diana was talking about. So when I go there, I am so grateful, because I feel like I am looking at my ancestors from before. before this was taken away, or tried to be taken away, I should say, the separation and the division that they pull together. And I don't mean to romanticize people. They have issues and problems, and obviously part of the issue is just dealing with the external governments that want to kill the very life. Because when you go there, you also understand, which is what I hope, and I try for myself, and I hope for all beings, that we understand. And when you hear them talk and you hear them be with life, and that they do not live in the rainforest. They are not there with the rainforest. They operate and dream and act as one. They are part of the rainforest. And I think, and my heart sings of the possibility that is actually awakening, and women are in the front of leading that. And Indigenous women up there, we might be small in numbers compared to other groups, but not at all small in wisdom, who are up there saying, we are all one. And to be a whole human being is to understand our relationship to ourselves, to other people, to all of nature, the four-leggeds, the swimmers, the stars, the earth, everything, and to spirit. And I am so grateful to be alive at this time. I can't think of a better time, and I can't think of a better moment than to be right here, right now, with you, sisters, as I so honor all of you, each of you, and what you're doing locally, what you're doing globally, what this drop, whatever, we know it's all interconnected everywhere. And now scientists, physicists, quantum physicists. I was just listening to Deepak. All these people are saying the things that I just like, oh my gosh, my ancestors are singing, are smiling, because they told us, continue to do the dance, continue to chant, continue to speak the language, connect to all beings. Everything is sacred. And they are realizing how important this and this is to the future, the present and the future of our world. For us, for our children, for our children's children, and for the children of all species. So let's keep going. It's a good time to be alive.
Yes.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you so, so much, Sister Anita. Thank you so much. Big embrace. My Dekshi, my uncle Vine Deloria Jr., played such an important role in my life. And I met him as a little boy. And I remember when he was on his honeymoon, he came to our house, and I was this little guy then, and he stayed up. He had our whole upstairs, which was kind of this whole house. But anyway, he had the whole thing. I remember my mom and dad telling me, I didn't understand at the time, say, son, now you let your uncle be quiet up there. So I didn't understand it at the time. But anyway, I'm so pleased. He had such an incredible, incredible impact on so many, not just quote unquote our Indigenous people, but all members of the human family.
All.
Brilliant.
His words are still singing.
He's still singing. He's still right here with us. And, one of the things that was really came to my mind when you were talking about we are sacred, was when I was kind of beginning my journey and going to Sundance and sweat lodges and various ceremonies. You can if you don't watch out, you get a little bit of spiritual, cultural ego. And so, I was kind of feeling pretty good about
No,
myself.
I think that's very important, because humility in the ceremonies I've been to in different places around the world, there are a number of themes that come through. One of them is about women and coming forward, our voices, and following the heart, the leadership of women. But it's humility.
Exactly.
Critical.
Exactly. And, so you, of course, at the same time, it's all part of the journey. Like my dad said, he said, he said, son, sometimes when you need to learn humility, the Creator will humble you. You humble yourself because you need to get humbled. But anyway, so this grandmother saw me kind of, and so she needed to kind of get me down my feet back so I could walk the spiritual path with practical feet. So she said, grandson, she said, I've been hearing you've been going to different ceremonies and so forth. but I want to ask you a question I wanted to find out. She said, what's the most sacred ceremony of all ceremonies? And of course, I went on, because all I could do is kind of recite these different ceremonies that I attended, And she said, those are all most wonderful ceremonies. She said, but the most sacred ceremony of all ceremonies is the birth of a child. And she looked right in my eyes and she said, then who are you? Not loud. She said, who are you? Not quite like that, but, that's really who each and every one of us is. And that's why I love that one sacred teaching. It says, my first counsel is this: possess a pure, kindly, radiant, and loving heart, that yours may be a sovereignty, ancient, imperishable, and everlasting. And that's who we are.
Oh.
And then that whole understanding about pixels, well, I'll talk about later, because now the person I learned about pixels from, and tell a little story behind this. You have to tell the stories. Back in 1962, I just had this, I don't know what it was, something that drew me to, and this buddy of mine, to hitchhike. He was one of the only Jewish relatives in high school. I was only one of the indigenous young people. So we just seemed to make this connection. So anyway, the two of us took off and hitchhiked from Walla Walla to New York. And then we cut a freighter over to Europe. And we hitchhiked around Europe. We were there during the Cuban Missile Crisis and all those, and lots of things happened. Got a chance to go into East Berlin when it was still occupied there, or whatever they called it. But I got a chance to go to the Netherlands. And it was so strange because back in 1953, when they had the big flood, everything got flooded out, in the spirit of Wakpala, where my father comes from, Wakpala and the Standing Rock, who were in the late 1800s were donating to China, donating to Armenians, donating to flood victims and so forth. In that spirit, he wanted to teach me. He said, he said, there all these floodings happen. He said, there's a little boy over there, just think, they lost all their toys. And so anyway, he got me to think of the idea of giving my toys, to send over some toys, not all my toys, but some of my toys to the Netherlands. And so about 6 months later, I got a box back, and in that box was some wooden shoes and a whole number of things from a gift from Hans Grootmeyer. So I'd made that connection over there. And then when I hitchhiked through the Netherlands, I stopped and actually saw Hans Grootmeyer and his family. We had dinner together, and so it established, for some reason, a spiritual sense, that act of connecting when I was a little boy. And then in 1995, I met a wonderful gentleman from there, Fred Motzer. Fred Motzer then invited me to come over to another gathering where they're talking about talking circles. And in that, I got a chance to meet an incredible circle there of wonderful, wonderful, wonderful relatives. Bernard Hartrup, Karen Lindemann, her beloved husband, Peter, many others. And from that relationship, we began to explore, the healing that has to happen in Europe. Well, the interesting thing was, a little over a year ago, in consultation with our dear sister Anneloes Smitsman, as well as Karen Lindemann, as well as Shannon Lane, my daughter, there was this inspirational thing and Diane was so important in this. And I don't mean to go on too much, but I think it's very important, because what I was seeing is this cultural appropriation, that feeling was going on, and how that was creating this disunity. So what we came back to was because when you go to Europe, you realize down there, despite 13 million men and women being burned up during the Inquisition, that down there, the roots still to the earth, the people, the indigenous people down there. And so these sisters, not only those living in Europe, but others feeling they have a European background, then established the Sacred Circle of the Indigenous Women of Europe. And then, so beautifully, Diane, God bless you, they came from Friesland. I'll tell you, they're fierce too. They're pretty good warriors, according to my relatives who fought against those relatives in World War I, who are fighting from our perspective against our relatives over there. So they're strong warriors. And so anyway, from that, I've got a chance to work a lot with Anneloes, and she has has written a award-winning book, Love Letters from Mother Earth, nominated for various awards. She has her degree in law from Leiden University. She just has so many wonderful gifts. I go on and on. But she's just finished her PhD dissertation, and it's about thrivability. It's about how, from this position of oneness, we can have and build a thrivable world, and she describes that so beautifully. She also, another really interesting thing, because my Uncle Vine wrote about this whole relationship between he calls it C.G. Jung and Sioux Indian culture traditions. He's looking at Jung. She's worked with now creating and seeing emerging, let's say, out of the womb of these past archetypes we know from Jung, the hero's journey, all that there's new archetypes being born, 5 new archetypes you talk about that are being born today from within us that we need now to unify and come together. So anyway, from all that way, from that flood, 1953, this beautiful relationship, many, many wonderful relatives from the Netherlands, I want to introduce to you a dear sister, Anneloes Smitsman, who has really been a champion of reconnecting to her own roots, deep, deep in the heart of her own tremendous people, as well as has reached out to Australia, Africa, different places to be with and learn from other Indigenous women and relatives. So, Anneloes, please.
Brother Phil, thank you so much for this incredible introduction and weaving the story, and all my sisters here, thank you so much. It's really, really inspiring, to be part of this panel and to weave this larger wisdom and understanding. So also where Diane was starting with the sacred heartbeat and Anita taking it further into the dreaming. And indeed, Brother Phil, as you were saying in a lot of my research as well, of really looking at how do all these different indigenous understanding really weave together and provide a foundation, also scientifically, for what in indigenous cultures we've known since forever about unified reality of life. And that we are now at this incredible time in our human story when we are really able to bring all these different perspectives together, and that we are honoring that, because we're coming out of a world and a worldview that has unfortunately had so much division and so much polarization, and therefore has created a lot of suffering. And what is really incredible, as Anita was saying as well, and Diane as well, what we are all sensing into, what we are feeling, and what we see evidenced, what we are witnessing, is that there is truly a much more unified consciousness that is starting to emerge, and that it's emerging in all fields of life, in all walks of life. And that it is just, just like the pause already there, because this is just so unique. Even us having this conversation right now is truly remarkable. And what we've seen, if we're looking at the patterns of our let's really take it further into this human civilization, that we have had for a very long time patterns of dominance, that instead of honoring all the sacred principles and having that inclusive perspective that in indigenous culture is so vital, what we've seen is that very often there would be one principle that starts to dominate over another principle, one culture becoming dominant over another culture. And that as a result of that, if we're now really looking at it as one system rather than all these different worlds, if we're really seeing ourselves all as, these planetary beings, we're all children of Mother Earth. So when we have that perspective, we start to see that as a humanity, we've been very much out of balance. And we've been very much out of balance because we were not really in right relationship with the wholeness of ourselves. We created different ranking systems and different prioritizations, and some cultures started to grow much faster at the expense of others and expense of life itself. And what is really profound now, in what is really coming through and emerging and guiding all of us in all these different fields, is that it's like we're starting to listen. now that we have seen the terrible destruction of that imbalance, now that we are starting to wake up to the consequences of that lack of maturity as a species, now that we are starting to truly be reminded of our responsibility, and that responsibility is also the inner growth as much as the outer growth, we are starting to have come also into the humility that Anita and Brother Phil were talking about earlier as well. And with that sacred humility, and that scientific humility and economic humility, I want to bring them all into that space of humility and honor. We then realize that we can only find our way through this crisis in which we are now by honoring all these different perspectives and starting to see how they are all weaving together, and that everybody's stories matters here. And in addition to that, we have now also the technologies that can connect us. So we have the means as well across the world to learn from each other in a way that we never have before, which is truly remarkable. And this is why I've also found that in my research, what Brother Phil was talking about, these new archetypes, if we're looking at it from a systems perspective and we're looking at the old archetypes, very much were these archetypes that of the individual hero or heroine's journey or a certain deity, but not really this kind of collective development understanding, which has been there in the indigenous teachings. There, kind of the collective sense of self has always been the foundation. And out of that collective sense of self, the individual sense of self would emerge. I learned this a lot from the Australian Aborigines and the teachings of Kanini, where I've spent 8 years, which for me was so important, where it starts with that you cannot understand your own personhood and your sense of self if you don't understand your relationship with the land. And what I've been kind of observing now is that as we are seeing the cost and the expense of not understanding, if we are starting to see the cost and the expense of ignoring how life is giving us the feedback and the consequences of our actions, there is a humility emerging and an openness to say, really, perhaps it's time to listen. And it really is time to listen, and also listen again to the original custodians, to listen from them what their wisdom was in the caretaking of the land, and how this deep relationship with the land informs our sense of identity. Because in many ways, it's like we are been going through an identity crisis, where if you're seeing it again from that perspective of unity, and this unity science is coming in now to confirm what indigenous wisdom has known since forever, that life is a unified reality, that the principles of interdependence and interconnectedness, these are not just mere words. The living web is not a mere word or a concept. It's real. When you really want to look at that from an evolutionary biological perspective, of a systemic perspective, if you want to look at it from a quantum physics perspective, now there's all the new theories and models that are confirming what indigenous wisdoms that we have known, that the interdependence and the interconnectedness is real. But even a person who doesn't believe in any of that, the greatest evidence that it is real is we only have to look at our climate crisis. We thought that just extracting all those resources that we did and rising our emissions would be without consequence. We tried to blame it on the sun, and for so long in the climate denial, it's the sun, we're just going through a sun cycle. No, we've had a 50% biodiversity loss in the last 50 years. We are heading towards a 3 to 4 degree warming, even though we're talking about trying to limit it to 1.5. Emissions are still rising, despite us knowing better. So what we're seeing now is that the consequences of our actions of the last centuries are real. We cannot deny our interdependence or our interconnectedness. We can see it. We can see it. And we are the planet. As Anita was saying so powerfully, the people within the Amazon reminding us, they are the Amazon. We are Mother Earth. And it's not that we are living in the universe. We are the universe. We are life. And it's so true that when we change the dreaming, we also change the reality. And even that scientifically, there are ways of that we can talk about that now. David Bohm called it the implicit dimension. Erwin Laszlo talked about it by the Akashic dimension. Dr. Hugh Carvin talked about the cosmological dimension, that there is within our finite dimension, space-time bound, an infinite dimension. And in that infinite dimension, it's not space-time bound. And the wholeness and the unity is always there, but that wholeness and the unity is everywhere. Like when Brother Phil was telling me a little while ago, and he's saying, yeah, my grandfather always said the center of the universe is everywhere. I said, yes, it is. We even can cosmologically and scientifically talk about it like that. It's like a little pixel, a little code, that sacred code of life. And that is indeed everywhere and accessible everywhere. So the wholeness of who we are is everywhere. We really, truly are that unified reality. So coming back to that identity crisis, so when we have this unified reality, and then there is this being that can't agree within itself because it thinks this part of itself is more important than the other part, and they just are not in touch and are not communicating, they're not in sync. Like Diane was saying, you know, the heartbeat of the waters, the heartbeat of the earth, the heartbeat of the universe. That's the story of harmonic convergence and synergy and synchronization when we're not in sync. So when we start to hear the heartbeat is everywhere. And that heartbeat is our unity that brings us together. It informs us. So when we reach out to each other in that way, we remember each other in that way, that we're all relatives. What becomes possible is incredible. And as a collective, we've never really truly tapped into that. We've had different cultures keeping that wisdom for this time, and I'm so grateful to all of you and your ancestors in what you've also been preserving for this time, and I'm grateful to my ancestors, what they've preserved and kept alive within me. And as we were going through these hundreds and hundreds of years of division and forgetting and duality, and that now is this time of this great awakening and great remembering, and that we can already, right now, when you hold your hand on your heart, my heartbeat and your heartbeat and our heartbeat in the circle is really one heartbeat that connects us all. And yes, with that, I just want to thank you all.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Sister, for that sharing. And really, I think that we're coming, as I see, to a place where we have the political definitions of indigenous peoples and so forth, you know, and we battle over our rights and those things and so forth. At the same time, I think that another thing is occurring, and I think this is what unfolded from the Sacred Circle of Indigenous Women of Europe, and that is the Global Council of Indigenous Women, which is really a whole different relationship, unifying process, where the definition is for that the sisters have made for a member is, are you a grandmother, a mother, a daughter, a sister, an auntie, daughter, granddaughter, etc., of who was born and nourished upon the sacred breasts of Mother Earth. And that's that feeling of saying, okay, if we're really going to come to peace, it has to be the peace with those who birth all future generations. I'm not saying that that's the only role, but that connection back to Mother Earth and coming to unity and harmony and understanding we are Mother Earth. We are the sacredness of Mother Earth. We are that which gives birth to all life as Mother Earth. That unity found very so deep in all of us, which really, I can be there with you just as well. In fact, I was adopted as a woman. In fact, I'd like that. Anyway, so here we are together as one. And then I see that that's where, from that womb of unity of womankind is born from the womb of unity, connected directly to Mother Earth, all future generations. And by the way, whatever it was when I was born, that's where I was born from, as I realize it and I look back. So it's very interesting to me to hear some of these discussions back and forth. So now, thank you again. And now how do I want to? We have prophecies about the emergence, of course, of the seventh generation. There's a prophecies about seventh generation decision making, but we also have a prophecies about this generation that's arising. In fact, from you look at Singing for a Spirit, Divine Gloria Jr., he talks about, what in our lineage, the arising of those after so many generations. And so we can see it happening. Over 50% of our world's population now is under 35 years old. And so I really saw this so really manifested when I went to Standing Rock and saw this community of Wakpala, which first arose, Bobby Jean Three Legs, Taco Shaw of mine, and through our home call relationship with PZ. Anyway, I saw this rising happen. We saw young people, not just indigenous people of let's say all Dakota background, Oceti, Chikoan. These were young people of mixed background and being drawn for some reason to this place because it was a call of the Spirit to arise as prophesied of our seventh generation. And so I've been so pleased as I go around the world and see these young people, Tetescott, my grandson, others, so many, Takaya Blaney. We could just go on and on. Kaya George, Cedar George. I mean, many, go on and on that are arising. So I'm going to say this last thing my dad used to say before I introduce my Toja here. And I'm going to give her a little bit of background because she's but he told me this. He used to always tell me this. He said, Dad, he said, son, he used to tell me this. He said, son, I was born wild and I'm going to die wild. I don't want any part of Pepsodent toothpaste, Preparation H, Fruit Loom underwear. I don't want any part of Pepsodent toothpaste. I don't want any part of Pepsodent toothpaste, Preparation H, Fruit Loom underwear, or Diet Pepsi culture. I'm born wild, I'm going to die wild. Well, the Toja I'm going to introduce to you now is exactly that. There's no way she's going to, is not going to live wild and die wild in the most highest spiritual sense. Now, on one hand, she went to Stanford University where she graduated with honors at a younger age in cultural anthropology and a number of things here. I want to get all the things. She's Sheila in Dakota is called Cheyenne and Dene, Navajo. She is just a brilliant artist, brilliant speaker, good thinker. And she's been through some real, I can really relate to her because my younger years were, how do I say it? Well, they were quite in-depth learning years. So she's everywhere. So I'm so thankful that she could be with us today. And I want to give my love to her beloved partner, Eric, who is just a fine young man. And to see that beautiful love you have there, Toja, it's so nice. And so, Toja, this is your time. Whatever's in your heart and soul at this point, please share.
All right, sounds good. And I just want to forewarn that the moderator may ask me to turn my video off if my bandwidth isn't strong enough, but I'm going to go ahead and start going unless I'm instructed otherwise. I'll start out by saying, well, first of all, thank you so much, Phil, for your passion to bring us all together and for just believing in us as women and for believing in the importance of our messages and our voice today, such that you have put so many hours into convening this. Thank you. I want to thank all of my aunties on the call, Diane, Anita, and Anneloes. Thank you for speaking and sharing really beautiful wisdom that it's just so rich to have all these different perspectives. Okay, so I'm going to introduce myself in my native language, my mother's language, which is Dinebazan, or the Navajo language. Okay, so Ya'at shik'e aro shidene she'e lanish ejitchachi nishlino huskai dene bashishi ashi hedashichi Scandinavian edashinale Taos, New Mexico de na shop akot ego dene astanishli. I said, greetings, my kin and my people. I'm from the Black Charcoal Streak Division of the Red Running Into Water clan of the Dene Nation. We are also incorrectly known as Navajo. We are indigenous to what is now called Arizona, Colorado, Utah, and New Mexico. I grew up in Taos, New Mexico. On my dad's side, I'm Cheyenne. I'm also of European descent. So I think I resonate with what was said earlier, which is in the indigenous realm, you know, you never had to merge spirit with science. You never had to have these conversations because we already understood them to be one. And English is an impoverished language, which makes it very hard to talk about these things. I think as English speakers, we don't realize how limited we are. But English itself is a language that separates science and spirit from the get-go. It assumes that separation before you even open your mouth, and the words have that assumption built into them. So it's hard to talk about these things, but we're doing it anyways, and we're doing a really good job. So I wanted to talk about some linguistic terms in the Dene language that help us understand unity, and what I hope everyone listening will use in their daily life. But for instance, what I just said to begin was Ya'at shik'e aro shidene. So Ya'at is actually the unification of sky and earth. So Ya comes from Yadish, which means father's sky. At-e comes from at-ed, which means little girl, but it also means it's another word for the earth. So when you say Ya'at-e, what you're actually saying is you're acknowledging the interface between the earth and the sky, because you're bringing those two together in one word. And you're effectively saying, wow, look where we are. Look, I mean, just take a second to look where we are. We are at the place where the sky and the earth kiss, and where all life sprouts. Life doesn't sprout way up high in the sky. Life doesn't sprout way deep down in the earth. It sprouts right there on the surface, where the unification of the masculine and feminine come together. And so unity is built into just the way we say hello. And it's acknowledging diversity at the same time, because the sky is not like the earth, and the earth is not like the sky. And yet without their union, we wouldn't be here. And so it cradles that paradox of unity and diversity. Because yes, we are all one, and yes, we are all very different. So how do we be very different as one? The answer is we have to be very different. Biodiversity is the foundation of life. And so differences are our Creator's gift to us. And our differences are just as necessary as water. Our differences and our diversity of everything is what makes us whole and strong, such that even scientists measure the health of an area based on its biodiversity. So Ya'at takes that into account. It's saying hello, that's how we greet each other, but you're really saying, look at this beautiful thing that happens when the sky and the earth touch. All life, as we know it. And then I said, shik'e, and that's a really important word. Or it's actually two words. Sh means my, but it doesn't just mean my. It means my in a really warm and fuzzy way. Like the way that Phil, Dekshi Phil, my Uncle Phil, whenever he sees me, he says ton Jean, you know, which means, I think it means granddaughter. And so what he's, or maybe it means niece, I forget exactly what, but what he's doing is he's making me his relative as he's talking to me. And he just met me a few years ago, but he's taken me in the way someone would take in their own niece or their own granddaughter. So she has that, what I call the warm and fuzzy phenomenon built into it. And warm and fuzzy might not sound very scientific or important, but warm and fuzziness is what kept everything going. And that warm and fuzzy feeling of being kin, K-I-N, being kin, is the solution to our problem of disunity. So when you say she, you're saying my, but you're saying my beloved. Beloved is kind of built into that little syllable, she. So when I say shemasane, I'm saying my grandmother, but built into the language, the assumption is already in that she. You're saying my beloved grandmother. So when I say yat shik I'm saying first unifying the sky and the earth before I even speak, and acknowledging what a miracle it is that we get to be here. Whoa, holy moly, all the destruction in the world makes us forget what a crazy miracle this is, that I'm even breathing, that I'm even alive in this place that Creator made. But anyways, then I say shik, which means my kin, my kin. And so that's important because your kin is people, right? Because I'm actually talking to a lot of people right now. You know, if we had that kind of richness in the English language, we could neutralize so many hard feelings before we even start talking. That's the way we begin our sentences. Yat eshik. Greetings where the sky and the earth kiss, this miracle of life, my beloved kin. You know, it's like, now maybe you understand what I'm saying when I say English is an impoverished language. So it's hard to have these conversations. We make do, but I want us to know that we've been at a disadvantage before we even open our mouths. And so if it feels hard to be close, just know that it is hard. That's the way Ikhtome set it up. That's the way Coyote set it up. Over many destruction, exploitation, oppression was the English language born. And we speak a mindset. We speak a language that reflects those mindsets. So if it feels hard, no, you're not crazy. You were never given the tools you needed from birth to connect with your people. Okay. So then I say shidane. So ya'at shike aro shidane. I'm saying, and my people. Shidane, my beloved people. So when you say shidane, you are bringing everyone around you in as your people, as the people you have to fight for. That's very different from walking into a conference room and saying, all right, good morning, everybody. Let's get this meeting started. You know, it's way different because you create separation because you're all just professionals going into your board meeting and you're all gonna go home and lead your separate lives and you're all just fighting for your. But when you say shidane, greetings, my people, you are asserting that everyone in that room is who you fight for day in and day out. And my elders told me, Lyla, always begin your speeches with that. Auto means and. So you're saying my kin and my people. Because we want you, wherever you go, whether you're talking to Black people, Asian people, white people, people from India, people from Indonesia, Australian brothers and sisters, everywhere you go, we want you to remember that those are your people. And those are the people that you are fighting for. Because as we have said in this webinar, time and time again, interdependence is not some foofy, woo-woo concept. It is a natural law that we have to reckon with, as Anneloes was saying. And so when I go out in the world and I say, I'm really reminding myself that everyone in front of me is my responsibility to fight for. And if we all had that kind of gift in our language, if we were all blessed with that, imagine how the world would be. It would be so beautiful. Because when you have something to fight for, you are strong. You live more vibrantly. You live with greater purpose, with greater meaning. And so this is how we tie our spirits to the earth, is through, like Diane said, our name. Our name is what tells us how we're going to fight for those people. Our name is, we all know we're going to fight for our people, but we don't exactly know how. Maybe we are carpenters. Maybe we are musicians. Maybe we are mothers. Maybe we are technicians. But our name helps guide us and say, this is how you're going to fight for your people. And so if you have a people to fight for, and if you have a name which gives you your way to fight for them, your spirit gets tied to the earth in a very strong way, and you have a reason to be here. Now, for a long time, I didn't have that. I was a drug addict. I had been raped so many times that I didn't like myself. I was so high on so many drugs that I couldn't feel my purpose. I couldn't feel how many beautiful things there were for me to fight for. So I lost that. But I regained it when I had started learning my language. Not just the Dene language, but the language of my heart, which was that, we are here to fight for each other. Our hearts are here to pump for each other. And that's when you give someone that understanding that they have something to fight for, you're not just helping the stuff that they're fighting for. For instance, maybe you help a CEO who's Latino, who fought his way to the top because he wanted to prove he's just as good as white society. But then all of a sudden he's in selfishness. And then he has kids in cages on the border. You have the power, you have the connections, you have the resources to make a change. And he realizes that. You're not just helping the kids in the cages. You're not just helping his people. You're helping him. You're lighting a fire in him that is joyful, that finally has a reason to live. And that fire is going to just blaze so strongly in him and give him a whole new vantage point and a whole new reason to live that's even more satisfying than a Jaguar car, even more satisfying than a corner office, even more satisfying than all the money and a nice apartment. He's gonna have something that hole in us that has to be filled is gonna be filled. And I think that the Dene language, as well as a lot of native languages, hold these answers and hold these keys that help us live a more connected, unified life with the world. So that's my main message today. I guess the only other thing I want to share is about, going back to that conversation of diversity and unity, and that paradox is that, for instance, in the state of California, they estimate that about and sorry my camera's so close. My speakerphone is a little broken, so I'm trying to talk close to it. I know. Thank you to the text for being patient with me. But in California, you have over 80 languages spoken there prior to European arrival. 80 mutually unintelligible languages spoken in what we now call California. It also happened to be the most biodiverse region of the United States, they say. And so how do you get along? How do you be of one mind when you have that many languages? How do we hold unity in one hand and diversity in the other hand? Well, one technology that my grandfather taught me was that he said, Lyla, wherever you go on this earth, always follow the ceremony of the people of that land. They are the ones who speak the language of that particular place because they have been in that place for a very, very, very long time. And so he said, this is where the language speaks through those people. He said, Lyla, you're a desert woman. You, Denebazad, Nehezad, that language is the sound of the desert speaking through you. You go to the Northwest, you don't know how to speak the language of the salmon, so you're gonna follow the people of the salmon. You're gonna follow their ceremony, their rules, their way of life, because they've been refining it for a long time. So this is how we created harmony within our nations, and we weren't perfect by any means. However, from what I understand, prior to European arrival, we had had a lot of practice on how to coexist. We had tried and failed so many times that we finally learned how to succeed. And that success was based on honoring the people of each biome. And so what does this mean today? It means however you would apply that to where you're standing. Who is the people of that land? And how can we breathe life into their teachings and their sciences and support them on their terms so that the people of that land can be the leaders of that land? And so that's all I want to say. I could say a lot more, but I have a tendency to talk a long time without knowing it. So I'm going to go ahead and end there and just thank all of you so much for being a part of this panel with us.
Georgia. Yes. Thank you so much, Georgia, for that incredible, wonderful sharing from the very heart and soul of the seventh generation. And one thing I'm so thrilled about, my father always taught me that the responsibility of the older generations with those coming, following that red road behind you, or many times before you, that you must strive so that everyone carries that journey further than you. That you go on forward as far as you go, and then they carry it on and go on with it. And so to see, and I can say that today at 75 winters, just a little bit older, that you're going already way, way, way beyond anything I've gone to. And you're going to see things and do things and accomplish things. And I talk to those out there as well who are listening. The same thing, no different. The things you're going to see, the younger generations, the things you're going to do, the things you're going to witness, unfold as prophesied, will go beyond even the murmur of syllables and sounds. And so this has been such a great, great coming together in this circle. I so thank each one of you. And what I'd like to do to close, so everybody has the opportunity just to say a little farewell, or whatever you'd like to say. Begin with Diane and go through the circle. If Toja has gone, then she's already said her goodbye. So please, if you would, please begin, Diane. Whatever you'd like to say, and we'll just go through and close it that way. And then I'd like to sing a song, if I may.
Now, Brother Phil, I want to just offer these words to some way, our Creator, to give thanks for this privilege of listening to my sisters and to my niece today, and for my deeply loved and respected Brother Phil for convening this gathering, because by creating space and giving voice to women in leadership, women in emerging leadership, what is happening is that we are fulfilling a prophecy that women would take their rightful place in the world, not to overpower men, but to walk in tandem now in this new generation. So I want to leave you with a phrase from my language, Agwegong Sakso Tiohak. All of us all together. May the Creator continue to bless your most beautiful spirits and protect you in the world. Nyawa, thank you.
All my precious relations. I pause because I want you to take that in to every cell of your body and out to all the beings around you. And because these minds can confuse things, but we also don't want to leave them behind. It's not about separation. I would be honored if you continue to ask yourself, what are you being taught? What are you telling yourself about being separate, about being alone, about division? And then ask yourself, what are you being taught? What are you teaching yourself? What are the others teaching you about being connected, about being one, about the unity of life? It is a worthwhile journey, because in that, my hope in waking time and in sleeping dream time is that you will come to what I heard Lyla June saying, is that one of the most meaningful life is to be proactive, a proactivist, not about being against. It's not saying we don't want to change systems and structures and behaviors, absolutely, but the energy, that life-seeking life is from being a proactivist. So with that, thank you all on this panel, and thank you in this circle and in the larger circle, all my precious relations.
Dear friends and family, all of us here together, thank you so much, everybody, for everything what you've shared. And my message to you would be, draw strength from our unity. And so in the times that you may feel confused, or you feel alone, or you don't know what's going on, just remember, just close your eyes, and in that moment, hold that intention in your heart to connect in with that collective field of wisdom. Because in this collective field of wisdom, everything that we've ever gone through, everything that we've learned is there. And by you connecting into that and remembering that and bringing that forth, it can give you incredible strength. It's been a source of strength for me in all my life. I've gone sometimes through the greatest challenges, And it's in those moments that I really didn't know anymore. I said, this is so hard. How am I going to find my way through that? I would close my eyes and pray. And I remember that no matter how painful this is, someone else has gone through this experience as well. And they have learned and they have grown. So in those moments, I would always call forth from that collective love, that collective wisdom, that collective support to carry me forward and to help me to learn and to grow, because no matter what happens, there's always the possibility to learn and to grow and to grow and to grow together. So with that, I send you all my love and my blessings.
Shahat Nsago Shema Aro Shiche Kadon Hojon do Les Nehema na Hastan Yaris His Nehitka House Cast no dot edge na Hotsui Chahas yes Sisna Jen Sonzis do Cosly the Benetsa this now deadly only Shiche Hashchesti and Shiche Hashtel one Yoskaya Astan Nehema Astan Lehenehema Nada Askaya Ashkina da Suyat it Yod Assassin is Assassin Tor Sanashtin Tobiash Tredin Ashkin Anest Aniat it Sana Raib and Hujon. Pray for the healing of all of our family around the world. Pray for hope. Pray for us to not have fear, even though there's so much temptation to get into fear right now. But to remember that everything's going to be okay. And that we have an opportunity to be brave now, and that's a gift, to work together in this time. And it's, let's do it. Let's be rock stars. We have an opportunity to do it. Let's do it all together. Kia and Sago.
Well, Budak my very, very, very beloved relatives of the human family, and especially I want to really thank so much my beloved sisters and my Toja, my niece, for taking the time to join me. It's just been such a joy to hear the incredible vision and deep message you have to give. I'd like to sing a little song in your honor. And, as I was sitting here, I had a chance to go to India in 1982 and found so many parallels. It's very interesting. This song was passed on by George Whirlwind Soldier, who was a Vietnam vet. He's gone on. He was a medic there. But it's one of the 4 of the White Buffalo calf pipe songs. It's kind of the shortest or smallest, he said. But I'm not any great Dakota speaker, but I just see these words like Lyla was sharing. Just 1 or 2 have such deep meaning. So this little song says, Wayankie Chinupa Kile Wakayalo. What it's really saying is that the pipe, the sacred pipes, holy of holy, the bowl, which of course the mineral people, the power of cohesion or unity, the stem, which is the plant people. Of course, they always have animal people in the bundle, and you turn the pipe upwards with the bowl upwards. That's the human being there where you put it all together. It's all of us united together. And so that's what the song says. It says, behold, Wayanki is behold. It calls upon the power of all the universe to bring all our relatives to all we've gone through, all our lineages to come and be with us. And then it says, behold us. But what it's saying is, behold the oneness, the unity, just as Toja was saying, what we're all talking about. Behold this. Now it's interesting, in India, they have their oldest chant is Om Namah Shivaya. Om Namah Shivaya shares the elements that we have, the same space, and then there are 4 elements. And when it also has the same thing, that all is connected, all is one. And so I sing this knowing that all of us, everywhere, all at once, have access here and now, at this moment, to the roots of who we are and dreams, if we open our hearts and minds to, and as we remember, to purify our hearts and minds. So again, you have done so much for me today. I thank each and every one of you, whoever you are here, that have joined us in a spiritual heart in one. So I'll just sing one verse of this. And then just if you want to blend out, it'll be fine. We'll just be a good one. And so thank you very much, your team, for helping us out here. Really appreciate it, your patience. And I want to say, this part I want to leave in. What's so amazing here is that we had this gathering together. There was no rehearsals. There was no visiting. The Everywhere Spirit brought us together, and it just unfolded because we're standing in the same place where we have the same guiding principles. And so, it just happened that way. So beautiful. Okay.
Why